owner of the US Mega Farmest video is Purimont para intratnamiento wino infringe de recos de autorenales. Los de recos de la novela y la imagen son del autor original, no reclama más propiedad. No te gusta esperar y quieres escuchar este fanfic completo ahora? Suscríbete a nuestro Patreon, donde encontrarás los mejores fanfics. Chapter 451. Little girl, you are not allowed to drink. After the fishing boat turned smoothly, Kinzu stood up and returned to the cabin. He remembered that there should be a wine cabinet on the second floor. Sure enough, in the living room on the second floor, Kinzu found the wine cabinet, in which some red wine he purchased yesterday was lying quietly. He took out a bottle and opened it. Kinzu entered to find 3 high-heeled glasses, put them on the tray and walked out. Seeing Kinzu coming out with red wine, Eva and Dale didn't say anything. They each picked up a high-heeled glass and filled half a glass. In the United States, it is different from China. In China, people usually drink at mealtime. In the United States, it is different. In their opinion, wine is not only for eating, but also for chatting and meetings. Even university professors will take a sip of wine when giving lectures to students. Wine culture is no longer just for dining tables. It is accepted by people in a wider market. Kinzu picked up his wine glass and shook it gently. Watching the blood-red wine swaying in the transparent high-heeled glass with his movements is also a beautiful enjoyment. The 3 of them didn't speak. They sat on the lounge chairs and enjoyed the sea breeze. Occasionally, they took a sip of red wine. It was really enjoyable. Especially with a beautiful woman around. Kinzu turned his head and looked at Eva, who was wearing a black t-shirt, denim shorts, and showing her long legs. He sniffed the sweetness in the air. At the same time, a hand that couldn't stand the loneliness had already begun to move. However, the little girl nestled in Kinzu's arms and arched hard. When Kinzu's attention turned back, he found that the little girl was looking at the red wine glass in Kinzu's hand with eager eyes, revealing a great desire. You want to drink? Kinzu looked down at her. Shirley didn't speak, but nodded gently, clearly showing her desire. Kinzu smiled, picked up the glass and was about to let her taste it, but his arm was pulled by Eva beside him. Clean, you can't let her drink. The expression on Eva's face told Kinzu that she was serious. What's wrong? Isn't it just a drink? It's no big deal. Kinzu looked at Eva with a puzzled look on his face. In his opinion, although it's not good for children to drink alcohol, it's no big deal to try it occasionally, right? When he was a child, he was tricked by an uncle in the village to drink a small glass of white wine, which made him drunk for a whole day. Under Shirley's reluctant gaze, Eva snatched the cup from Kinzu's hand and looked at him seriously. Clean, don't you know that in the United States, children under the age of 18 are prohibited from drinking? Violators are guilty. There is such a rule. Kinzu was confused. Then why do you let your children drive when they are teenagers? Eva shook her head. The definition of driving and drinking is different. As long as you have a driver's license, you can drive, but you can't drink. Kinzu was helpless. He had no choice. Who made him live on someone else's territory now? He had to get up and get a bottle of drink for the little girl, which made the little girl happy again. After this, Kinzu lost his mood to drink. He went to the deck and looked back. After a while, the ranch could only be roughly seen. Hey, babies, do you want to have a fishing competition? Kinzu winked at Dale next to him. Eva heard that, not paying attention to the frivolity in Kinzu's words, but laughed softly. Clean, we haven't reached Cape Cod yet. Do you want to catch bluefin tuna here? Why not? Kinzu smiled mysteriously. Dale, who was verbally taken advantage of, curled her lips and sneered. Clean, do you think it is so easy to catch bluefin tuna? Although she is not a fishing enthusiast and doesn't know why bluefin tuna is so valuable, just because it is valuable, it can be confirmed that it is not so easy to catch. Oh? Kinzu raised his eyebrows. How about we make a bet? Dale raised her eyebrows and said nonchalantly, what bet? Kinzu's thieving laughter gave Dale a bad idea. Sure enough, Kinzu's faint voice came into her ears through the air. If you lose, kiss me 3 times. Dale blushed slightly, and glanced at Eva next to her, but found that she seemed to have not heard this excessive request. No bet. Waving her hand, Dale sat back on the recline. What a joke, I just made up my mind to stay away from this guy yesterday, and today I have to kiss him. Kinzu raised his eyebrows and deliberately provoked him. Oh? Are you afraid of losing? Dale was furious. This guy is too much. Before she could think of how to refuse, she was pulled by Eva next to her. Okay, Keen, let's bet. Kinzu touched his nose, and in his heart he praised Eva, the girl, very much. She was getting better and better at doing things. It seemed that he had to reward her. Eva, what are you doing? Dale pulled Eva's sleeve nervously. What if I lose? Eva waved her hand and smiled and comforted her. Sister, don't worry. Do you think bluefin tuna is so easy to catch? A fish costs tens of millions of dollars. If it is easy to catch, it will still be our turn. Dale thought about it, and it seemed to be the case. It seemed that she was a little confused by this guy's conditions. Thinking of this, Dale felt ashamed in her heart. After all, she had lived for more than 20 years. How could she lose her direction when she was teased? And it's not like they haven't joked with each other before. Why didn't she react at the time? Shaking her head and throwing her thoughts out of her mind, Dale just looked at Kinzu quietly, waiting for him to start showing his fishing skills. Seeing that the two of them had no objections and the little girl was sitting there obediently, even Daha and Xiaohe seemed to know that there was going to be a competition. They all came to the side and squatted down, ready to watch a good show of a mother teaching her son. However, reality often disappoints them. They saw the owner go back and get a fishing rod and start fishing. Daha stood up bored and shook off his messy white hair. What's so good about fishing? Just as he was about to go back, he heard his brother Xiaohe behind him, barking non-stop, and barking so urgently. Turning around in confusion, Daha was about to scold Xiaohe, but after seeing the situation clearly, his originally shrunken pupils suddenly dilated. Oh my god, help! A fat codfish that was more than half a meter long and shining with silver light rushed towards him. Chapter 452 Blue Line Parrotfish. Seeing Daha screaming in fear of the cod, Kinzu laughed unscrupulously. This scene was so joyful. However, Xiaohe, who was standing by, saw his brother being bullied, and rushed over. Unfortunately, he was too small, too young, and too inexperienced in fighting the enemy, so he was directly overturned by the cod. Now the deck was lively. Daha and Xiaohe charged at the cod again and again, but were overturned to the ground again and again. In the end, the two little guys got angry and stopped thinking about subduing the fish with force, and began to use a brutal biting method. When Kinzu came to his senses, a good cod was bitten by two guys and it was full of holes and looked miserable. These two guys have learned to cause trouble. Kinzu smiled and handed the fish in his hand to Eva. Keep it, it's ruined again, this is a lunch. Eva took the fish, came to the deck and shouted to the people below. Simon quickly brought a box of fish. Eva put a fat sea bass into the fish box, turned around and teased. Why? Clean, don't you want to catch bluefin tuna? We always catch cod. Kinzu smiled faintly. Don't worry, I'll let you see how good I am in a while. Although he said so, Kinzu was not sure in his heart. He just accidentally discovered that the bluefin tuna marked by the system was actually in the nearby sea area, so he sent Cheese who came with the boat to lure them over. As for whether he could lure them over, he was not sure. Ha ha, Clean, you're so funny. You don't think you can catch bluefin tuna with fake bait, do you? Eva couldn't help it and giggled. Don't you know that bluefin tuna eat live bait? Kinzu glanced at her and said without blushing, your bluefin tuna is fake. I'll show you the real bluefin tuna later. As he said that, he lifted the fishing rod and actually caught a colorful parrotfish. After a period of understanding, although Kinzu dare not say how much he knows about the ocean now, he still remembers some of the more special species in his heart. And parrotfish is one of them. The reason why this fish has an impression is not because parrotfish looks beautiful, but because of its spirit of solidarity and mutual assistance. According to scholars who study this fish, if a parrotfish accidentally touches a needle hook, at the critical moment, its companions will quickly come to help. If some are surrounded by fishing nets, other partners will bite their tails with their teeth and try their best to pull them out from the gap. Therefore, it is difficult for ordinary fishermen to catch this kind of fish. The reason why he was able to catch it is probably related to his fishing skills. Another feature of parrotfish is that they can weave pajamas. Yes, this is true. The way they weave pajamas is like a silkworm spinning silk to make a cocoon. They spit out white silk from their mouth, and with the help of their ventral fins and tail fins, after 1 or 2 hours, they weave a whole shell, which is their pajamas. But what makes Kinzu laugh is that sometimes its pajamas are too hard, and when it wakes up in the morning, it can't bite its mouth open, and it will suffocate to death in it. And their partners will never help it bite open the pajamas. because they think that their partners are still resting and it is not convenient to disturb them. Is this just asking for trouble? Kinzu muttered to himself. Wow, Clean, what a big blue line parrotfish, almost 20 centimeters long. Eva's voice interrupted Kinzu's observation and saved the life of the unfortunate blue line parrotfish. Oh, yes, it's a pretty little fellow. Kinzu came to his senses and handed the blue line parrotfish to Eva. Taking the blue line parrotfish, Eva carefully put the little fellow, which was less than 20 centimeters long, into the fish tank beside. Eva was relieved until she saw the little fellow flexibly circling around the little turtle. Eva, do you want to keep it? Kinzu looked at the blue line parrotfish in confusion. Its body was lavender, and its back was covered with yellow, with several vertical rows of purple spots and intermittent lines. A hard purple stripe ran down the back, and the central fin was yellow with blue stripes. Nodding with satisfaction, well, it is indeed a beautiful little guy. Eva smiled and kissed Kinzu on the face, pointing at the little guy, and said, Look, what a beautiful little guy, it would be a pity not to keep it. Besides, it is not easy to catch this kind of fish. Kinzu raised his eyebrows proudly. That's right, if it was someone else, they really couldn't catch them with a fishing rod. Seeing Kinzu's proud look, Eva giggled and criticized, Clean, don't forget, bluefin tuna. Kinzu curled his lips and swung the fishing rod. Wait, watch how I catch a bluefin tuna. What bluefin tuna? Boss, have you found bluefin tuna here? Will's puzzled voice came from behind. Kinzu didn't even turn his head. Yes, I saw a few bluefin tuna just now. Putchy. Eva couldn't help laughing at the side. This guy, he lied without blinking. Will looked at Eva strangely, not understanding why she was laughing. He excitedly came to the side of the boat and looked at the endless and surging sea. Boss, are you sure you saw it? In that case, we can start baiting. Kinzu nodded. He did see Cheese coming back, and the marked bluefin tuna also came to his side. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly felt that the fishing rod in his hand was bent, and the line in the reel was being released at a flying speed, 1 meter, 2 meters, 10 meters, 20 meters. Big fish, definitely a big fish, boss, hurry up. Before Kinzu could react, Will on the side shouted at the top of his lungs, scaring the people behind him. Especially the two little guys who had just had a good meal, and were licking their hair with their pink little tongues. As a result, they almost bit their tongues. Therefore, the two little guys stood up with their teeth bared, looking at Will's thighs with dissatisfaction, wondering where to enter. It was Eva who found something wrong and patted the two little guys on the head. Don't make trouble, or Keen will spank you. Frightened by Eva, the two little guys subconsciously shrank their butts. The shadow of being beaten for turning the wrong way at the time once again surfaced in their minds. They looked at each other helplessly, and had to hide in the corner with their tails between their legs, drawing circles on the deck. Thanks to Fengxiai, Xini and Lao Chong, and 123 Jinglei for their rewards and support, and thanks to the lonely and suicidal patient for the reward of 999 book coins, and thanks to Chapter 453. Harvesting bluefin tuna begins. When Will shouted for the second time, Kinzu finally reacted, grabbed the reel in a hurry, and began to release the line consciously. Fortunately, the fishing rod and reel were fixed on the fishing position. If Kinzu had held them in his hands, he would have been dragged into the sea by now. Because less than a minute had passed, according to the display of the reel, a full 50 meters of fishing line had been released. Will looked at Kinzu's clumsy movements, and then looked at the fishing line that was still being released quickly, and said with some concern, Boss, this is definitely a big one, do you want me to do it? Kinzu was about to nod and agree, but then he thought, damn, this fish was hooked because of the fishing effect, if someone else took it, would it break free? Thinking of this, Kinzu shook his head decisively. It's okay, I'm fine. After all, I have to exercise, right? Will nodded, without saying anything, but turned and walked down. Boss, I'll go down and take a look. Reduce the speed of the boat. Kinzu didn't have time to answer, but nodded subconsciously. He was really flustered by this fish. Fortunately, after more than 10 minutes of releasing and pulling the line, the big fish is no longer running. At this moment, the fishing line has been released for nearly 100 meters. Fortunately, this line is specially prepared for catching big fish, otherwise there is a real danger of not being able to reel it in. At this time, it was Kinzu's turn to perform. Unlike before, he could do nothing except keep releasing the line. He tried to reel in a few meters of line, but the bluefin tuna turned around and dragged the fishing line wildly. Yes, Kinzu has confirmed that the guy dragging the fishing line wildly under the water is the bluefin tuna. Why is he so sure? Because Kinzu is watching the live broadcast now. While releasing the line, Kinzu did not forget to open the system and the map, and then he could clearly see the bluefin tuna's every move. The most emphasized sentence in Chinese military strategy is that knowing yourself and knowing the enemy will ensure victory in 100 battles. This is the situation Kinzu is in now. Seeing the bluefin tuna stop to rest, he began to reel in the line desperately, and when this guy was not prepared, he could directly drag it back several meters. When the bluefin tuna reacted and turned around to continue running, Kinzu began to release the line smoothly again, with a posture of he is so arrogant, I will not move. This went back and forth for half an hour. When the people downstairs were waiting anxiously, Kinzu was having a lot of fun. Now he can reel in and release the line freely, without the initial rush. It can be said that this is also a kind of tempering for him. After all, if you do something more, you will naturally become familiar with it. Kinzu is in this state now. He is no longer in a hurry to get the fish, but is honing his skills. Under Will's control, the fishing boat slowed down to the slowest speed, and it was running well with this guy. At this point, the bluefin tuna finally gave up its last struggle. No matter how Kinzu let out the line, it would not run away. It could not run anymore. Looking at the time, Kinzu felt that it was almost time, so he began to reel in the fishing line frantically. 50 meters, 40 meters, 10 meters, 5 meters. At this time, there was a sudden earth-shaking shout from the deck below. Because at this time, everyone could see the huge blue shadow through the clear sea water. Oh my god, it's really a bluefin tuna. Eva covered her mouth and stared at Kinzu without blinking, trying to see what else this man could do. Dale was on the side, looking at Kinzu with an incredible look. Was this his good luck? Or was it her bad luck? The fishermen downstairs were not only surprised to encounter the bluefin tuna, but also its huge size. A 5 or 6 meter long bluefin tuna. This is not a shark, but a bluefin tuna, which can sell for several thousand yen per ounce of meat. How much can it sell for? How much will each person get in bonus? Therefore, several fishermen, including Will, began to get excited. These are a lot of green franklins. Kinzu ignored the two women around him and the thoughts of the crew. He had reached a critical moment. Because the bluefin tuna seemed to know its upcoming fate and started a new round of dying struggle. Kinzu became cautious now. At this time, if this guy ran away, he would really be ashamed to face the people of Jiangdong. Will, who was downstairs, looked out and looked at Kinzu upstairs, and shouted loudly with a trembling voice, "Boss, pay attention, the scoop net is going down." Kinzu did not speak, but nodded at him to indicate that he knew, and then guided this guy and led him into the scoop net. It seems that the lucky woman favored Kinzu again today. He thought it was difficult to accomplish, but this guy cooperated with Kinzu very well. After Kinzu slightly pulled the line, it dived in. The crew immediately began to pull in the scoop net. Soon, a huge net caught the 6 meter long bluefin tuna, and then it was quickly caught on the deck by the crane. It's so fucking tiring. Kinzu put down the fishing rod and rubbed his arms. This is really not something that ordinary people can afford. Looking back at the two women who still had surprise on their faces, Kinzu straightened his body proudly. How about it? I said I could catch it. You still don't believe it. Eva curled her lips and cursed Kinzu secretly. Is this just a mean man who succeeds? Dale didn't say anything. She began to regret it secretly when she caught the big fish. However, he was still very excited and was not in the mood to make any bets. After saying hello to the two girls, he ran to the deck on the first floor. Boss, come and see, it's really an amazing big guy. Will pointed at the bluefin tuna that had been dropped by the crane, his face full of excitement and unable to express it. Yes, it is indeed a big guy. Kinzu nodded secretly. He suddenly remembered something. Would the companions of this guy still be in this sea area? Thinking of this, Kinzu looked at the magnificent sea surface, turned around and ordered, Will, deal with it for me quickly. I think there are still bluefin tuna nearby. Let's try it. Still? Boss, are you sure? Will opened his mouth wide, with an unbelievable look on his face. When did bluefin tuna gather together? Kinzu shook his head and smiled and said, I'm not sure, but it's always right to try. Will nodded. He agreed with Kinzu's statement. Whether there are or not, you can only know after trying. He turned around and shouted, "Simon, hurry up, freeze the blood right after you drain it, and be quick with your hands and feet." Chapter 454a. Few more big guys came. Hearing Will shout, Simon agreed without looking back, and with a sudden force in his hands, he hoisted the fish up. He didn't feel it in the water, but when he got on the deck and saw the bluefin tuna being hoisted by the crane, everyone gasped. It was really too big, 6 meters long. If it was shorter, it would be as high as a 2-story building in China. Although they were surprised, everyone still worked very quickly because there were more important things waiting for them. Aiden quickly cut off the gills of the fish with a knife, and Hubbard began to bleed the big guy. Fish are cold-blooded creatures, but that doesn't mean their blood has no temperature. Before, when they were struggling to escape, the temperature of the fish blood would become higher, and now that they are dead, the fish meat is cold. If the fish blood is in the body, it will damage the fish meat and produce lactic acid, which will make the fish taste bad. After quickly cleaning the fish blood, Will measured it, and then asked Aiden and Hubbard to put the fish into the fish tank with a cart and freeze it. "Ha, boss, this fish is great. Without the tail, it's still 6.1 meters long. If the fish meat is better, it can be easily sold for millions of dollars. We're really rich this time." Simon danced with excitement. He had a deep understanding of his boss's generosity. The bonus for just this fish was probably higher than his monthly salary. How could he not be excited? Before he could get excited, Will kicked him with a flying kick. Hurry up and cast the bait. There may be bluefin tuna nearby. If you run away, I'll throw you down and fish you up." Simon turned around and dodged Will's attack. While running to the warehouse, he didn't forget to mutter, "What's the point of fishing me up? It's not worth anything." Will was immediately angry. There was no way to deal with this guy. But fortunately, Simon also knew the importance of playing and making trouble, but he was still serious when doing work. He took out 2 boxes of frozen herring and mackerel from the warehouse, put on gloves, took the small fish to the chopping board and cut them into 4 pieces with a sharp knife, and started making bait. Will took a look, turned around and walked into the cab, and anchored the fishing boat to make it easier for Simon and his friends to spread the bait. When Simon started to get busy, Will also turned on the sonar fish finder. I have to say that humans are really smart. They can even invent such things. If you find fish in this way, you can really find one accurately. If there were these things in the past, it would be great. In that case, there would probably be no fish in the ocean, right? Thinking of this, Will shuddered inexplicably. "How is it, man? Have you found anything?" Kinzu walked in with 2 glasses of red wine. He didn't plan to do it himself this time, but to see what these fishermen did. After all, it was luck to catch one occasionally. But if you catch them continuously, you will become a monster. He didn't want to be seen as a monster. Hearing Kinzu's voice, Will came back from his deep thoughts, took the wine glass and took a sip, and said with a smile, "Not so fast, the bait has just been thrown, and it will take some time to get results." Before the voice fell, the sonar fish finder suddenly made a sharp beep sound. Hearing this sound, Will was stunned for a moment, rubbed his ears, and showed an incredible expression. However, Will was stunned, but the sonar fish finder would not be stunned, and still made a sharp beep sound. "Will, what is this sound?" Kinzu looked at him with some confusion. At this time, Will also reacted suddenly, threw away the high-footed glass, rushed to the screen of the fish finder and took a look. Then he ran out of the cab like flying, and shouted to Simon and others who were still throwing bait, "Throw the bait quickly, change to live bait. There are several big fish approaching." Although Simon was a little surprised, he was an old fisherman after all, and he was taught by Will. For the order issued by Will, he subconsciously chose to execute it. Quick knife chopped a frozen herring into 2 pieces and threw it into the water. Then he took out a live herring from the fish box next to him, hung it on the hook and threw it down. While working, Simon asked excitedly, "Will, are you sure you didn't see it wrong? A big fish came up just after you threw the bait." Will rolled his eyes and didn't bother with this guy. Instead, he turned back to the cab and continued to stare at the screen of the fish finder. At the same time, he picked up the walkie-talkie from the side. "Simon, pay attention, there are a total of 4 big fish, one is about 30 meters under the sea at the bow, and the other few are scattered around. Damn, Simon, hurry up, hurry up. This is definitely a bluefin tuna." "Okay, Will, don't worry, as long as it is confirmed to be a bluefin tuna, we think we can get them up." Simon's voice came through the walkie-talkie, which also eased Will's nervous expression a little. Indeed, as Simon said, as long as it is confirmed to be a bluefin tuna, there is no need to worry too much. Because as an old fisherman, he knew these guys very well. They are very greedy, especially greedy. Bluefin tuna usually just swims on the seabed, and when they swim to the surface, it means they have found food and are ready to hunt. There is no doubt that it is the herring sediment thrown by Simon that have attracted them all. Moreover, bluefin tuna consume a lot of energy because of constant swimming, and the bait in the sea is not so abundant that it can be seen everywhere, so they will never let go of any food. This is also the reason why fishermen can catch them with fishing rods. However, everything we guessed was based on common sense. But can these guys really be inferred according to common sense now? Kinzu thought otherwise. If it weren't for the disappearance of one of their companions, they probably wouldn't have appeared, right? But he didn't say anything, but watched them busy with curiosity, which was also a test of the level of these fishermen. After Will regained his composure, he looked at Kinzu, who was curiously staring at the fish finder screen. He smiled and pointed at the screen and explained, "Boss, look, this green sign is the image reflected by the sonar. The underground layer is the seabed, and this curved image is the tuna. Could it be another fish? For example, a shark?" Kinzu asked curiously. Will shook his head and smiled. A rookie can't tell the difference between a shark and a bluefin tuna, but an old hand can tell at a glance. Look at its swimming trajectory and its swimming speed. A shark won't be so cunning to shake left and right. It will rush up to eat the bait. And a shark won't be so fast. If it can be so fast, it must be a tuna. Thanks to Honey Sweet, Fensksil Love, and 10 years old Bug for their rewards and support. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en cines fuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrar la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas incredibles. Chapter 455 God, today is April Fool's Day. Just as Kinzu and Will were waiting nervously and constantly reporting the position, Simon's excited roar suddenly came from the intercom. "Ha ha, it's hooked, God, I knew you loved me." Kinzu was stunned when he heard it. It really took the bait. He hurriedly went outside with Will and saw the fishing rod reel rotating rapidly. The main line, which was half the thickness of a disposable chopstick, was quickly pulled out, and the fishing rod inevitably bent. Simon held the reel, looked at the sea with a focused face, and shouted, "Aiden, prepare the harpoon and the landing net for me. If the fish runs away, I will throw you into the sea and fish you up." Kinzu was confused when he heard it. Looking at Will next to him, the meaning was very clear. This is worthy of being a good apprentice you taught. Will smiled awkwardly, stroking the short beard on his chin, and said, "Boss, you watch the fishing boat, I'll go help." Seeing Aiden holding a harpoon and a landing net, standing next to Simon with John and Hubbard, Kinzu felt itchy in his heart. How could I be missing from such a fun thing? As for the fishing boat, what's there to be afraid of? It's already anchored, isn't it? And now that the fish is caught, there's no need to look at the fish finder. So Kinzu also came to the fishing position with a glass of wine, looking comfortable, and watched the few people discussing something fiercely. Simon was reeling in the line with a smug look on his face, and he didn't forget to show off. "Look, guys, I told you, God is on my side." Although he was showing off, he was an old fisherman after all, and his hands never stopped moving, always keeping the fishing line at an appropriate level, so that the big guy on the seabed would not easily break free. Will beside him nodded secretly, but he scolded mercilessly. "Reel in the line quickly, man, if you let the fish run away, I will definitely hang you on a hook and throw you off." Simon shrugged his shoulders and began to stare at the sea with a depressed face. He didn't even dare to resist when Will scolded him. This old man who was both a teacher and a father to him was an elder. This time, it took longer than Kinzu's previous time. It took more than half an hour before the big guy on the seabed was tired. Feeling the pressure gradually subsided, Simon raised his eyebrows proudly. Just when he was about to say something, he saw Will next to him with a serious face, and he held back his words. However, the movement of his hands suddenly increased, and he began to reel in the line quickly. Similar to the previous procedure, more than 10 minutes later, a hint of blue finally appeared under the clear sea water. "Look, boss, it's a bluefin tuna, it's really another bluefin tuna." Will immediately noticed the blue color, and looked at Kinzu's shining eyes, his face full of excitement. "This is different from what you see through the fish finder. Although it looks very close, it is actually far away. Now it's different. The big guy in the sea has given up resistance. How can they not be excited when another big guy is about to fall into their hands? Kinzu nodded on the side and said nothing more, but his face was full of satisfied smiles. He didn't expect that those stupid fish were really attracted by the bait. You know, they are so big, and such a small thing is not enough to fill their teeth. I really don't know what those guys are thinking. If the bluefin tuna in the sea knew Kinzu's thoughts, they would probably vomit blood and die of anger. Damn, you lured our boss all the way here, but don't you know that our brothers haven't had breakfast yet? Chasing that damn sea python took a lot of effort, and now after the boss's tossing, they are now tired and hungry. And at this time, there is food that doesn't move. How can they not accept it? So, when Kinzu was watching Simon's wonderful performance with great interest, he suddenly heard a rustling sound from the side. What is that? Kinzu looked around in confusion, but didn't find anything unusual. After all, the old fisherman has more experience. Just when Kinzu was still looking around, he heard Will yelling from the side. Hurry, boss, you caught a fish too. Caught a fish? Kinzu looked at the fishing rod in astonishment. Isn't it? The fishing rod that was originally straight on the fishing position has now bent down, and the reel next to it is making a rustling sound of releasing the line. Damn, how could it be? Throwing down the high-footed glass, Kinzu hurriedly pressed the reel seat and began to consciously release the line. However, Kinzu soon found something wrong. After all, this was not caught by his fishing skills. It felt so hard. He didn't tighten the fishing line well several times and almost let it escape. Hurry, Will, come here, I'll leave it to you. Kinzu had no choice but to call Will loudly. He didn't want such a big bluefin tuna to run away. Now, the few people who were originally around Simon all ran to Kinzu's side, leaving Simon alone shouting. Hey, guys, you can't do this to me again, I can't handle it. Simon's voice was almost crying. Damn, these guys, I just showed off a little, why do you treat me like this? In the end, Kinzu couldn't stand it anymore. After handing the reel to Will, he called Dale, picked up the harpoon and the landing net and came to Simon, waiting for the opportunity. Oh, thank God, it's still the boss. Simon breathed a sigh of relief when he saw this. He was really afraid of losing such a big bluefin tuna. If that happened, Old Will would really throw him into the sea. Okay, do your job quickly. Just tell me when you need it. Kinzu held up the harpoon, looking eager to try. No. Seeing Kinzu's excited expression, Simon was frightened and quickly explained. Boss, this big guy can't be harpooned, it will damage his meat and integrity. Kinzu looked at this guy in confusion, waiting for him to continue. Who knew that after waiting for a long time, there was no sound? He looked up and saw that the bluefin tuna in the sea had revealed its true face. It was another big guy nearly 6 meters long. Oh, God, is it April Fool's Day today? Why are there so many big guys? Simon held the reel tightly, showing an expression that he had seen a ghost. Kinzu saw this and kicked him hard, shouting, Hey, man, reel in the line quickly. If you let this big guy get away, I will never throw you into the sea. Facing Simon's curious eyes, Kinzu said in a low voice, I will definitely sell you to Africa. Chapter 456 World Record. Although he knew that the boss was joking, Simon couldn't help but think about what the consequences would be if that really happened. Thinking of those cute black uncles showing their healthy white teeth under the scorching sun, Simon couldn't help but tremble all over and shudder. Boss, just watch, I'll get this damn guy up right away. Rolling up his sleeves, Simon almost swore. Kinzu nodded without comment, and together with Dale, he opened the scoop net, ready to attack at any time. After Simon exploded his little universe, he became unstoppable. The bluefin tuna was dragged closer by him little by little. Quick, boss, bring the scoop net. Kinzu and the other two responded and quickly sent the scoop net out. Soon, after more than 10 minutes of fierce fighting, the bluefin tuna was finally dragged onto the deck along the stern with the help of the crane under the joint efforts of Kinzu and the other two. Kinzu looked at the bluefin tuna. It was spindle-shaped, round, and had smooth and graceful curves, like a drop of water. Its fins were a darker shade of blue, and its back to belly was silver-gray, which proved that it was an Atlantic bluefin tuna. Clean, is today your lucky day? Dale, who was standing by, couldn't help but ask. She couldn't describe her feelings in the word surprise anymore, but numbness. Yes, numbness. Just now, she bet that he couldn't catch any bluefin tuna, but now he caught 3. Dale rubbed her head in confusion. Who can tell me what's going on? When did bluefin tuna become everywhere? Kinzu laughed, hee, and didn't say anything. Instead, he leaned over and stared at Dale's beautiful eyes, and said with a smile, "Don't forget the bet, the bet." Looking at Dale's embarrassed expression, when Kinzu was about to say something else, cheers came from Will's side. Dale seized the opportunity and fled away, with a voice floating from afar. "Boss, I'll go help first." Kinzu smacked his lips and said nothing. "Little guy, let's see how long you can escape." He approached Will and saw that the bluefin tuna on the seabed had already surfaced. Judging from the size, weren't they the same group of guys? Touching his chin, Kinzu muttered to himself, 3 have come up, were there 5 or 6 of them? After thinking for a while, Kinzu couldn't remember how many there were, but it didn't matter. Anyway, he had already got 3, so this trip was not in vain. Looking at the group of fishermen, who were posing in front of the suspended bluefin tuna and taking selfies, Kinzu suddenly became interested. He went upstairs to pick up Shirley and handed the camera to Weaver. They took a few photos of each of them individually, and then took several group photos with the little girl in his arms. Shirley seemed to be very interested in this big guy. Her cute big eyes never left the bluefin tuna. Kinzu asked curiously, "What's wrong?" "Shirley, do you like it? If you like it, let's eat it at noon." The smiles on the faces of several fishermen who were taking photos happily froze. "What? Eat it? They don't have such a good digestion ability." In their opinion, this kind of thing can only reflect its value if it is sold. However, after a long time, they all knew the status of the little girl Kinzu in his heart. If the little girl said she wanted to eat it, Kinzu would probably let them stew this big guy at noon. Therefore, everyone stared at the little girl nervously, fearing that she would spit out 2 words that made them feel distressed from her cute little mouth. Fortunately, the little girl shook her head, frowned slightly, and said 2 words that made Kinzu laugh and cry, "So ugly." Everyone present first breathed a sigh of relief, and then looked at Shirley with a smile and tears. "Ugly? Why don't they think so? This is a lot of frankling, who dares to say it's ugly?" Touching the little girl's pigtails, Kinzu smiled and said, "Okay, since it's ugly, let's not look at it." Shirley nodded and leaned her little head comfortably in Kinzu's arms. For her, being in Uncle Kin's arms was the happiest moment. Before they rested upstairs for a while, Kinzu's red wine had just been poured, and Will ran over excitedly, his face full of excitement that he couldn't suppress. "Boss, what a big harvest." "Oh?" Kinzu looked at him in confusion. "Have all the bluefin tuna been processed?" Will nodded, and without hesitation, he picked up the red wine next to him and poured himself a glass. After drinking it in big gulps, he said, "Boss, the 3 bluefin tuna have been processed and put in the ice cabin." Wiping his mouth, Will smiled and asked, "Boss, do you know how long the biggest one is?" Without waiting for Kinzu to reply, Will continued with his hands and feet dancing. 6 meters and 2, boss, the biggest one is 6 meters and 2 meters long, and even the one with the smallest mouth is 5 meters and 9 meters long. Kinzu felt a little distressed. Looking at the red wine that was ruined by Will, he quickly went to grab the bottle and hid it, muttering to himself, "You prodigal man, that's my treasured good wine, and you just ruined it." "What? Boss, what did you say?" Kinzu's voice was a little low, and Will didn't hear it clearly, so he couldn't help but ask again loudly. "Nothing, nothing." Kinzu waved his hands repeatedly, and then he remembered what Will said just now, and asked, "Have you measured it? Is it really that long?" Speaking of this, Will nodded excitedly, and regained his excitement, saying, "Absolutely right, we just measured it again, the body length is definitely 6.2 meters, and the weight is more than 600 kilograms. Kinzu had no idea about these, but he also knew that this fish was very big and valuable. So he smiled and praised, "Well done, this time all the fishermen's bonuses will be doubled, and your bonus will be doubled." Will first thanked him excitedly, and then asked, "Boss, do you know what this means?" Kinzu shook the goblet in his hand, letting the bright red wine flow at the waves. What a wonderful life. He was now immersed in the joy of making money. After hearing Will's words, he asked casually, "What does it mean?" Seeing this, Will excitedly said loudly, "Boss, this means that a new world record will be born in our hands." Creak, bang. The high-heeled glass that Kinzu was shaking in his hand slipped out of his hand and fell on the deck and shattered. The bright red wine just splashed on Will's face. Qinzu looked up at him in astonishment and asked excitedly, "Will, what did you say?" "World record." Will nodded, wiped the wine off his face casually, and said with the same enthusiasm, "Yes, boss, a new world record will be born. Thanks to Fengxiai and Shini and Lakong for their rewards and support, and thanks to Dubik for his 500 starting coins." Chapter 457 Chain Mu is not calm again. World record. It's a world record now? Qinzu muttered to himself, feeling a little unbelievable. "Yes, boss, this is the largest bluefin tuna ever caught. We are going to be famous." Speaking of being famous, Will waved his hands, and Qinzu was a little amused. "I really didn't realize that this old man had this hobby. Then what should we do now?" Qinzu was a little confused. Will also regained his composure at this moment. After thinking for a while, he suggested, "Boss, we should go back now and exhibit the fish in our restaurant. At the same time, contact Guinness and ask them to send someone over." "What?" Qinzu exclaimed, "Go back now? We just came out." Will shrugged, "Boss, the most important thing now is to use this bluefin tuna to promote the reputation of our restaurant." Qinzu was choked immediately. After thinking carefully, "Will, this old guy, is really good at doing business. Now is indeed a good time. If it was a while at night, the hunting season would be over, and it would be a bit troublesome to explain. But now, there is no problem." Thinking of this, Qinzu nodded. He was also a decisive person, so he said, "In this case, let's return." Will nodded and ran down excitedly to start the boat. If it was done well this time, all of them, the fishermen, would show up. Looking at Will's back, Qinzu smiled. He had one more thing to say, that is, there was still a month left, and at most he could go again in a few days. He had also made up his mind. No matter what, Cape Cod must be visited. Because the sunken ship he had dreamed of for a long time was more than 100 kilometers away from the manor, and Cape Cod was just about 100 kilometers away from the manor, which was why he had to go. "Clean, where are we?" Dale ran up with some doubts. She had noticed that the direction of the fishing boat was a little wrong. This was not the direction to Cape Cod. "Well, we are going back to the fishing ground." Qinzu looked at her in admiration. As expected of a Special Forces soldier, he could tell a direction in the vast ocean. "Back to the fishing ground? Why? Didn't we just come out?" Eva, who heard the voice, also came over and looked at Qinzu in surprise. So, Qinzu smiled and told them what happened. "What, this is the world record?" Eva also looked incredible. Although the fish was huge, she didn't expect it to be the largest in the world. Qinzu didn't say anything, but nodded. He had just checked it on the internet. This is indeed the largest bluefin tuna in the world that has been caught. Last time, at an auction in an island country, a bluefin tuna with a body length of more than 3 meters and a weight of 222 kilograms was auctioned for 150 million yen, which is equivalent to $1.88 million in US dollars. Seeing this news, Qinzu's heart became even hotter. If his fish was auctioned, how many US dollars would it cost? 1 million? 5 million? Or 10 million? But it's a pity that his own fish will not be auctioned. Thinking of this, Qinzu felt a pang of heartache. Those were all green franklins. After half an hour, the golden fishing boat, which had just been out to sea for a short time, returned to the dock under the surprised eyes of Papesings. Although he was very confused, Papesings did not ask much, but quickly helped the fishing boat to dock. After Qinzu and his friends got off the boat, Papesings whispered to Aiden and his friends. But Aiden was not very clear either. After all, they did not think as much as Will, and they were also confused. At this time, Will stood up and explained to them. Now, the fishermen were in a state of panic. They all looked at their phones to see if they had taken a photo of the world's #1. Qinzu had already returned to the villa with a few people. When he came back just now, he had already called Chen Mu. Although that guy complained a little, he was almost a handyman now, and he came here in person every time. However, he never gets tired of it, because every time he comes, there will be good news to announce. Thinking of this, Qinzu smiled knowingly, looked at the time, and guessed that Chen Mu would be here soon. As the old saying goes, if you mention Kao Kao will appear, which is absolutely true. Qinzu was still thinking about Chen Mu, and there was a sound of parking at the door, and then Chen Mu's voice sounded at the door. "Ha ha, boss, what good things are there this time? Is there truffles again?" Before he finished speaking, Chen Mu walked in a neat suit. Qinzu smiled and asked him to sit on the sofa, and then smiled and said, There are no truffles, but there is one thing that I think you'll be interested in. Hearing Qinzu say that there are no truffles, Chen Mu was a little disappointed. You know, black truffles are selling very well in restaurants now. But after hearing the latter, Chen Mu became energetic again. Is there another surprise waiting for him? Taking a sip of the tea brought by Eva, Chen Mu said with a wry smile, "Boss, don't keep us in suspense. If you have any good stuff, just bring it out." Qinzu was not in a hurry. He just sipped the tea with a smile until the cup of tea was finished. Then he said, "It's not a good thing, but this time I went out to sea, I got a few bluefin tuna." Bluefin tuna? Really? Chen Mu stood up excitedly. If this is not a good thing, then what is it? "Boss, how big is the bluefin tuna? How many are there?" Chen Mu asked nervously. Now his restaurant is not only short of truffles, but also this kind of high-end ingredients. Because now many fishermen, once they catch bluefin tuna, often sell it to island countries. After all, that is the market that consumes the most bluefin tuna, and the price can only be raised there. But the fact is that bluefin tuna is not only in Japan, this precious ingredient is also very popular in the upper class of the United States. This has led to many of their restaurants either sending people to guard the fishing port or cooperating with people from the fishing company. But no matter which one, it is not so easy to get bluefin tuna. Qinzu smiled and waved his hand, signaling Chen Mu not to get excited. After Chen Mu sat down, Qinzu organized his words and then said, "Brother Chen, the situation this time is a bit special. The bluefin tuna we caught is a bit big." "Big? How big? Is it over 100 kilograms? Chen Mu was a little uneasy again. Bluefin tuna over 100 kilograms is rare. Because once bluefin tuna exceeds 100 kilograms, its price will be far different from that of bluefin tuna that is only 70 or 80 kilograms. Chapter 458 Jefferson is no longer calm. Qinzu smiled and uttered a number that made Chen Mu feel devastated. "What? 600 kilograms? Boss, are you sure you're right?" Chen Mu looked at Qinzu suspiciously. He was no longer surprised, but suspected that Qinzu had not woken up. Qinzu did not explain, took another sip of tea, stood up and said, let's go and have a look." Chen Mu followed Qinzu in confusion and walked towards the dock. On the way, looking at Qinzu's confident back, Chen Mu couldn't help but mutter in his heart, "Is it really 600 kilograms? Shaking his head, Chen Mu said to himself, "This is impossible, this is unscientific, let alone seeing it, I have never heard of such a big bluefin tuna." However, when he stood in the freezer and looked at the 3 huge bluefin tuna placed in the middle, he was completely dumbfounded. He was even muttering to himself, "This is unscientific, this must not be true." But no matter how he rubbed his eyes and pinched his thighs, the 3 huge bluefin tuna was still lying there quietly, emitting a bone-chilling chill. "How is it? I didn't lie." Qinzu smiled and patted Chen Mu's shoulder from behind. Hearing Qinzu's voice, Chen Mu came back to his senses, but his body couldn't help shivering. The temperature in the freezer is not so fun. As Qinzu walked out of the cabin and returned to the villa, Chen Mu still looked unacceptable and looked at Qinzu with a strange look. "Hey, what are you doing? If you keep looking at me like this, I'll call the police." Qinzu felt a little uncomfortable being looked at, twisted his body left and right, and looked at Chen Mu with a scared look. "Get lost." Chen Mu cursed in anger, and then asked curiously, "Clean, how did you get these big guys up? They are not easy to get, right?" Speaking of this, Qinzu nodded in agreement. Yeah, it took a lot of effort. Chen Mu was about to ask a few more questions, and then he heard Qinzu continue. "It took a whole morning to get these 3 up. I don't know if it's enough for the gas." Chen Mu was choked and didn't know what to say. It took only a morning to get 3 such big guys up, and you still think it's too much effort? He really wanted to yell now, "If you think it's too much effort, let me come, how come I didn't encounter such a good thing?" Helplessly, Chen Mu had to change the subject and asked, "Boss, what are you going to do now?" Qinzu touched his nose, "This is what I want to discuss with you." Then, Qinzu told him about the possible world record. After hearing this, Chen Mu nodded. He was too tired to complain now. After thinking for a while, he asked, "This is indeed a gimmick, and it will definitely bring huge popularity to our restaurant, but if it is exhibited, how can we ensure its safety?" Qinzu thought about it. A 6-meter-long bluefin tuna must be worth a lot of money. Whether it was stolen, robbed, or destroyed, it would be a big loss. However, as the saying goes, you can't catch a wolf without sacrificing a rabbit. Qin gritted his teeth and made up his mind. How about this? Let's hire professional bodyguards to protect its safety. Chen nodded. This is a solution, but it will definitely cost a lot. Just when he was about to say something, he suddenly remembered a question and asked with a trembling voice, "Boss, are the 3 blue fine tuna the same size?" Qin looked at him strangely, wondering why this guy has become different now. But he still answered, "It's different. The big one is 6.2 meters, the small one is 5.9 meters, and the one in the middle is about 6 meters. Hearing Qin's words, Chen first took a breath of cold air, and then his muscles trembled a little. "Boss, this is great. If this is done well, our restaurant will be popular in an instant." Huh? Qin was a little confused, but he still suppressed his curiosity and asked, "What are the details?" "Boss, you see, we now have 3 blue fine tuna, all of which exceed the world record level. Why don't we take out the worst one first?" Chen had regained his composure at this moment. He sat on the sofa and said with a smirk, "Look, if we take out the smallest one first, it will not only break the world record, but also cause heated discussions." Qin nodded thoughtfully and stretched out his hand to signal the other party to continue. So, Chen continued, "After half a month or a month, we will announce that we have found another blue fine tuna, and this time we will take out the medium-sized one." Qin couldn't close his mouth when he heard this, and he sighed in his heart when he looked at Chen in front of him. As expected of a Chinese bloodliner, he is really skilled at this. But this is also a scene he is happy to see, so he smiled and agreed. But the next question stumped both of them. That is the problem of the display cabinet. Such a big blue fine tuna cannot be placed on the ground like that and let others watch. Moreover, the blue fine tuna must be kept frozen to ensure the quality of the fish meat. But such a big blue fine tuna cannot be chopped up and displayed separately. Qin rubbed his head, and his head hurt from thinking about it. Chen hesitated for a moment, and still suggested, "Boss, now it seems that we can only customize a display cabinet." Qin was stunned. Yes, it can be customized. So Qin looked at Chen opposite him, smiled at him, and directly handed the task to him. As for protesting, is it possible? He was too excited now. After Chen left excitedly, Qin sat back on the sofa a little depressed. Could he only wait now? But after thinking about it, Qin found that he could only wait now. The blue fine tuna could not be taken out of the ice storage without the display cabinet. However, the display will take some time, so there should be no problem with the identification, right? Thinking of this, Qin picked up the phone and called Jefferson. "Hi, my dear boss, it's an honor to serve you." The voice on the other end of the phone sounded particularly happy. Qin didn't have time to waste, so he asked directly, "Jefferson, can you contact the Guinness people?" "Guinness?" Jefferson repeated it first, and then asked in surprise, "Is it the organization that specializes in certifying world records?" Qin nodded, "Yes, it's them. Can you contact them?" "I can contact them." Jefferson hesitated for a while, and then continued, "But, boss, you have to tell me the details first, so that I can talk to them." Qin nodded in understanding, and told him what happened. Jefferson was stunned, and couldn't help swallowing his saliva, and asked stutteringly, "Boss, you are not kidding, are you? Today is not April Fool's Day. Thank you Fengxi and the lonely and suicidal patient for your rewards and support, and thank you Langzi for your rewards and support." Chapter 459 really became a world record. It has to be said that money makes things easier. After Jefferson submitted the application and attached a hefty expedited fee, the Guinness staff rushed to the manor the next morning. Jefferson pointed to a tall white man in a blue Guinness uniform behind him and introduced him to Qin. "Boss, this is Guinness's certification officer in Boston, Mr. William." Qin smiled and stretched out his hand to shake hands with the other party, and said politely, "Thank you for your trouble, Mr. William." William also stretched out his hand with a smile and shook hands with Qin, and his tone was also very polite. "Mr. Clean, you are too polite. It is our honor that you choose Guinness." The two of them flattered each other on the sofa in the living room. When Qin was about to give up, William changed the subject and said, "Mr. Clean, where is the blue fine tuna now? Can we go and have a look?" Qin breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly said, "Mr. William, this way please." As he said that, Kinzu stood up and led them to the dog, secretly complaining in his heart that this foreigner was too good at talking, even he almost lost. When they arrived at the dog, Will was already waiting there. Today, Will, at Kinzu's request, put on a brand new set of work clothes with the 4 bold characters Tycoon Manor printed on it. Seeing everyone come in, Will first winked at Kinzu, and then excitedly invited several people to get on the boat. Kinzu put it down. It seems that Will did a good job. He didn't expect Guinness to be so efficient. When he received Jefferson's call, they had already arrived at the door of the manor. Kinzu had no choice but to call Will, and then went to meet them. Sure enough, when they entered the freezer, there was only a bluefin tuna with a body length of 5.9 meters, lying quietly in the middle. The other 2 larger bluefin tuna seemed to have been hidden. Kinzu secretly gave Will a thumbs up, indicating that he did a good job. Will also gave a look at "I will do it, you can rest assured." The 2 of them communicated in silence. However, William and a group of staff next to them saw this big guy with a body length of nearly 6 meters, and they made uneven exclamations. They had checked the records when they came. The record holder of the previous session was only more than 3 meters long and less than 400 kilograms. It can be said that Kinzu's bluefin tuna surpassed the record holder of the previous session by more than 1/3. "Clean, can you tell me how you caught such a big bluefin tuna?" William turned around and looked at Kinzu in amazement. Kinzu smiled and grabbed Will and Simon, as well as Aiden and Hubbard, who were beside him. Of course, this moment of limelight should be handed over to them. And he also asked Will to reconcile his confession with several people. But, no, it was to reconcile their statements. Everyone agreed on the statement and accidentally captured such a big guy. Looking at the guys chatting with William inside, Kinzu smiled with satisfaction and turned to the deck. Jefferson chased out from inside and gave Kinzu a thumbs up. "Boss, you're really amazing. Such a big guy, it seems that Chen is going to be rich again." Kinzu smiled indifferently, thinking that his brother had not taken out 2 bigger ones, otherwise the foreigners inside would be scared to death. It was not until the afternoon that Jefferson took William and his party and left Kinzu's manor with satisfaction. Including William, several people felt that the trip was worthwhile. They were treated with delicious food and drinks. This was not work at all, but clearly a trip. Therefore, William was very happy to issue Kinzu's certificate, and even asked Kinzu repeatedly if he had any other projects to apply for. Kinzu was a little nervous. Damn, could it be that the bluefin tuna that I hid was discovered by this guy? Thinking of this, Kinzu looked at William with ill intentions, hesitating whether to let Cheese bite him. Fortunately, Kinzu later realized that this guy was addicted to the enjoyment and wanted to stay here. After sending the group away, Kinzu returned to the villa, lying on the sofa, squinting his eyes comfortably. This day's work also made him tired. Seeing this, Eva came over, sat beside Kinzu's head, gently lifted his head up, put it on her thighs, and helped Kinzu massage his temples. Humming comfortably for a few times, Kinzu's hands began to climb back dishonestly, but were gently knocked down by Eva. "Clean, stop messing around. It's broad daylight now." Kinzu curled his lips, raised his hand and sniffed gently under his nose. It was still so fragrant. Eva was amused by Kinzu's funny action and laughed. After finally taking a breath, she remembered what she wanted to say. "Clean, let me tell you something serious," Eva said softly after putting Kinzu's head back in place. Kinzu turned his head left and right dishonestly to get closer to the mysterious part, but said, "What serious matter? Tell me." Eva had no choice but to secretly glance at Shirley. The girl was struggling on the side, so it was okay. After a sigh of relief, Eva said, "It's like this. When I went to the vegetable garden today, I found that many of the leaves were eaten by something. Just eat it, there are so many vegetables anyway." Kinzu said indifferently, but his head moved more purposefully. Eva smiled bitterly, held Kinzu's head, tagged it gently, and said, "If it was just a little bit, I wouldn't say anything, but now it's increasing every day, and almost ruined a corner of the vegetable garden." Huh. Kinzu sat up. "In that case, is there some small animal running over to do something bad?" Eva nodded, but said in confusion, "I thought so at first, but the traces at the scene make me feel strange. It doesn't look like it was left by a small animal." Kinzu's expression became serious now. If a small guy occasionally came to cause trouble, it would be nothing, but if a large animal came, it would be a big deal. Let's not talk about the loss of the vegetable garden, let's talk about Shirley. If the little girl went out one day and encountered it, who knows what would happen? After all, herbivores don't mean that they are all gentle guys. In addition, if only one animal came, it would be fine. If a large group of them came all at night, would you still have your own vegetable garden? Thinking of this, Kinzu couldn't sit still anymore, and didn't care about taking advantage. He stood up and put on his riding boots, saying, "In this case, let's go to the vegetable garden to have a look." Eva nodded, stood up and followed Kinzu out. After walking a few steps, Kinzu suddenly turned around and shouted at Shirley, who was tossing Daha over there. "Thank you Fenxia AA for the reward, and thank you Dayu for the reward of 500 starting coins." Chapter 460. Vegetarian Alligator Snapping Turtle. Hearing Kinzu's call, Shirley stood up and walked over. Daha and Xiaohe were just about to celebrate their escape from the sea of suffering when they were dragged over by the little girl by one of their front legs. Woof! Kinzu looked at the pitiful appearance of the two little guys and couldn't help but hug Shirley, scratched her little nose, and said with a smile, "Okay, little girl, don't always bully Daha." Shirley let go of the two little guys and snuggled into Kinzu's arms. For her, listening to one girl is a good child. Shirley is of course a good child, so she has to be obedient. Kinzu smiled with satisfaction, turned around and walked out of the villa, leaving only one sentence that made Daha want to cry but not cry. "Daha, follow me." Eva smiled and said nothing, followed Kinzu to the increasingly lush vegetable field next to the villa. "Clean, look at that corner, a few tomatoes have been damaged. A small piece of green vegetables has been damaged, and even the slightly more delicate cucumbers here have been eaten by something." Pointing to a corner of the vegetable plot, Eva kept talking, and she looked a little distressed. Kinzu followed and walked forward, and sure enough, just as Eva said, several tomato plants were lying crookedly on the side. It looked as if they had been crushed by some animal, and it was a big horrible. The cucumbers hanging from the cucumber rack were only half of the ones on the top, and the half of the cucumbers on the bottom were missing. Kinzu walked over and picked up the cucumber and took a look, then said to Eva with a smile, "Well, the cut is quite flat, it seems that this guy has good teeth." Eva came over to take a look, and nodded, "Well, it looks like it was bitten off directly." Kinzu waved to Daha, who was following him listlessly. Daha immediately ran over, circled around Kinzu affectionately, and his little tail was wagging non-stop. It now has only one idea, to please its owner as much as possible, hoping that the owner would not let it go to accompany the little master. Kinzu rubbed the little guy's head that came over. "Don't make trouble. Come and smell it. If you find the murderer, I will give you a snack today." Hearing about the snack, the already diligent Daha became even more diligent. He came to the cucumber pulled off by Kinzu and sniffed it, and then sniffed around a few fallen tomatoes. Then he walked around again, sniffing with his little nose from time to time. Seeing Daha's actions, Xiaohe also became interested. The two little guys got together and began to sniff something around the vegetable field. Kinzu was a little dumbfounded. "What are you doing? I told you to smell the smell to find the murderer. Why are you running around in circles here?" However, before Kinzu could figure out how to teach these two disobedient little things a lesson, the crisp calls of Daha and Xiaohe came from the other side. Woof woof woof. Kinzu and Eva looked at each other. Did they find the murderer? So the two of them quickly followed. Daha and Xiaohe have now run deep into the vegetable field. There are some pumpkins and lettuces planted here, so it looks green. After much effort, Kinzu finally found the two snow-white little guys in this green area, and quickly walked over with Eva. The big and small huskies did not run around anymore, but circled around the place from a distance, with their little bodies arched, barking like ferocious beasts. However, this kind of pose might have some deterrent effect if other huskies did it, but the two chubby little meatballs did it purely to amuse people. So the big guy in the middle of the vegetable field was still leisurely chewing on the leaves, not taking the two guys seriously at all. Is this the alligator turtle?" Eva pointed at the guy that looked like a turtle but not a turtle, and looked like an alligator but not an alligator, showing an expression of disbelief. Kinzu took a closer look and it seemed to be the big alligator turtle they released last time, so he smiled and said, "It seems that this guy is still relying on us, and it has come to our door." "Clean, don't you know that the alligator turtle is a carnivore?" Eva scratched her hair a little madly. "Ah, you said it's a carnivore?" Kinzu pointed at the big guy who was not disturbed by the arrival of the few people at all and was still chewing the leaves happily, with a surprised expression. "Judging from the way it eats, you tell me it is a carnivore?" Eva looked at the giant alligator turtle and hesitated. Judging from the way it ate, she was not sure if this guy was really a carnivore. What should we do now? After studying it for a while, the two finally remembered this problem. What should they do now? Should they just let this guy steal the vegetables here? No, this is no longer stealing. Under the gaze of Kinzu and Eva, this guy was not embarrassed at all. Instead, he ate more happily. Kinzu hesitated for a moment. Should he let this guy destroy it? That's impossible. This guy looks like a big eater. If he lets him eat like this, what will he eat then? Taking out his mobile phone, Kinzu directly called old John. It's better to let others deal with this troublesome matter. Hi, boss, what do you want to talk to me about? Old John also came quickly, riding a brown quarter horse, and greeted from a distance. Kinzu waved at him, motioning him to come to the vegetable garden. Old John was a little confused. Could it be that the vegetable garden was infested with insects? It seemed that he had to go to the town to buy some pesticides. Before he could decide what brand of pesticides to buy, he saw the big guy surrounded by Kinzu and others, and was stunned for a moment. Oh, my God, boss, do you have another pet? Old John shouted a little exaggeratedly, but after looking at it for a while, he made another comment. Boss, this guy is really ugly. Kinzu looked at the old guy with a dark head. What kind of eyesight do you have? Why should I raise a turtle for nothing? Don't you think the eyes on your head are bright enough? But thinking of the little hawksbill turtle at home, Kinzu suddenly wilted again, and looked at Shirley resentfully, wondering why he was so bewildered and agreed to raise it. After 2 dry coughs, Kinzu put aside the messy thoughts in his mind, waved at old John, and motioned him to come over here. Old John took off the cowboy hat on his head, held it in his hand and walked over, wondering why his boss was looking for him. Kinzu pointed at the big alligator turtle that seemed to have noticed something was wrong and stopped eating, and asked, Old John, have you seen that guy? Of course, boss, isn't that your pet? Old John rolled his eyes. He was not blind. How could he not see such a big thing? No, Kinzu waved his hands and said depressedly, Old John, how could I raise such a thing? It's a thief. It sneaked into the vegetable garden and destroyed our vegetables. Chapter 461 The Alligator Snapping Turtle. Old John was stunned. He looked at the alligator turtle lying there motionless and burst into laughter. Boss, your joke is not funny. How could an alligator turtle eat vegetables? Kinzu looked back and almost fainted. The alligator turtle that was eating happily just now was now lying there obediently. Helplessly rubbing his head, Kinzu looked at old John with a wry smile and said, Do I have to joke with you? It was really eating vegetables just now, and Eva saw it too. Old John turned his head and looked at Eva. Could this be true? Eva nodded sharply and said, Yes, Uncle John, this guy was really eating vegetables just now. If you don't believe me, look, it's eating again. As she spoke, Eva pointed at the alligator turtle that continued to eat. Kinzu looked back and saw that it seemed to have discovered that there was no danger, so it continued to eat. Old John, you should believe it now. Kinzu spread his hands helplessly. Old John nodded, said nothing, and came over with a surprised look on his face. Strange, this is indeed a giant alligator turtle. How can it eat vegetables? After studying it for a long time, Old John stood up with a confused look on his face. He was really confused by this complicated situation. Kinzu was getting impatient waiting on the side, and urged helplessly, Old John, now it's not about finding out why it eats vegetables, but getting this guy out of here. Old John smiled awkwardly, and then he remembered the purpose of Kinzu calling him over, so he said, Boss, this is very simple, just wait for me to drive it out. As he said that, Old John went to find a pine branch, took it to the giant alligator turtle, and began to drive it away. The giant alligator turtle, which was eating happily, was disturbed from eating. He turned around a little annoyed, looked at the old guy who was hitting him with the branch, and suddenly pounced on him. Kinzu, who was standing by, was frightened and took 2 steps forward to pull Old John back. If he was bitten, it would be no joke. But Old John was old but not physically. His instincts were still there. He quickly stepped back and avoided the sudden attack of the alligator turtle. Old John, are you okay? Kinzu asked with concern, supporting Old John who was still retreating. Old John waved his hand, stood up and straightened his clothes. He looked at the pine branch that was bitten in half, and then said with some fear, This guy has a bad temper. Fortunately, he is still healthy, otherwise it would be really dangerous today. Kinzu also saw the pine branch that fell on the ground. The diameter was almost 3 centimeters, which was not thin. But such a thick branch was actually bitten off by the alligator turtle. How sharp must its teeth be? Kinzu was very annoyed as he stared at the alligator turtle that was still watching them vigilantly not far away. This guy is really shameless. Originally, because it was a protected animal, Kinzu just planned to send it away and be done with it. It seemed that if he didn't teach it a lesson today, it really didn't know who was the boss in this area. Thinking of this, Kinzu turned around and waved at the two of them. "Old John, Eva, you go back first, I'll call Cheese to take care of it." The two are a little stunned when they heard it. Cheese? Could it be a new cowboy on the ranch? But Eva quickly reacted, patted her chest with some fear, pulled Shirley next to her, and said to Kinzu, "Clean, then we will go back first, you have to be careful." After Eva's reminder, Old John also reacted quickly. Thinking of the huge python as thick as a bucket, his legs trembled a little. "Well, boss, then I'll go back first." After saying this awkwardly, Old John climbed onto his quarter and left without looking back. This vegetable field was quiet for a while. Everyone left, leaving only Kinzu, Da Hectares and Shao Hectares, and the giant alligator turtle that was watching him warily, still staring at each other from a distance. Kinzu sneered a few times, and after calling Cheese over in his heart, he just looked at the giant alligator turtle not far away quietly. "You little guy, do you really think I can't deal with you? So what if I protect animals? So what if I have sharp teeth?" While thinking about it, Kinzu heard a rustling sound from the woods next to him. Kinzu, who was sitting on the Daotai, suddenly became nervous. "No way! What the hell is coming again?" Thinking of this, Kinzu left the vegetable field and watched from a distance. After a while, a huge golden head appeared in the vegetable field next to the woods. Who else could it be but Cheese? Kinzu finally breathed a sigh of relief. He walked over and patted Cheese's big head twice, and asked in confusion, "Why are you here? Haven't you been basking in the sun on the beach?" Cheese raised his head and came to Kinzu's side, rubbing his thigh intimately, and then made two hissing sounds. "Huh. You said it's comfortable here." Kinzu looked back at the woods in confusion. "Isn't it said that snakes like to bask in the sun?" "Forget it, never mind, it's more important to do business." Putting aside the messy thoughts in his mind, Kinzu pointed to the big alligator turtle that was tense because of Cheese's arrival, and showed a ferocious smile. "Cheese, go, give it a good beating." Hearing Kinzu's order, Cheese raised his huge golden head and looked directly at the little guy opposite with cold eyes. Although he didn't know how this guy offended his master, it didn't matter. Since the master ordered, you should just take it as your bad luck. After thinking for a while, Cheese's head, which was originally held high, suddenly leaned forward and let out a hissing roar. The alligator turtle, which was already a little nervous because of the arrival of a big guy, was frightened and retreated again and again. Animals have a kind of wonderful induction ability to each other. The moment it saw Cheese, the alligator turtle felt the threat of death. Besides, even if there is no induction, the difference in size is there. The head of the other person is 7 or 8 times the size of himself. Is he going to die here today? He regretted it in his heart now. Why is he so greedy? Why is he so unlucky? It would have been great to stay in the lake. Although he could not be the king, his life was not in danger. Now, it is estimated that his life will be in danger today. The more he thought about it, the more scared he became. The alligator turtle retreated several steps in succession. He was accidentally tripped by the little pumpkin and fell several times in embarrassment. Cheese looked back at Kinzu speechlessly. His meaning was very clear. "Master, is this the guy you asked me to deal with?" Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en sinis fuetzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 462. It's over, we've cleaned up too much. Kinzu was also a little speechless. Is this still the big alligator turtle that launched a surprise attack under the gaze of several people just now? Why is it so cowardly now? Or did this guy look down on them from the beginning? Kinzu's face became darker and darker. Damn, he was not looked down upon by those foreigners, but by this beast. Waving his hand, Kinzu said, "Cheese, go ahead and teach it a lesson first." Cheese heard it and did not hesitate. The huge snake body swayed in the vegetable field and came in front of the big alligator turtle. The tail was gently raised, aiming at the target and exerting force suddenly. Qinzu only heard an inhuman scream, and then accompanied by the scream, a small black ball soared into the sky under his gaze. Plop. Qinzu covered his eyes speechlessly with his hands. It's over. It flew out directly like this. If it wasn't smashed into a pulp, it would probably be almost the same. Qinzu looked at the cheese next to him with some annoyance. He was so angry. What was this guy doing? I just asked you to teach him a lesson. Who told you to be so cruel? Being stared at by Qinzu's vicious eyes, Cheese felt cold all over and shivered involuntarily. He hissed twice with a face full of grievance. It was also very desperate. He just exerted a little force, but he knew that this guy was so weak and flew out directly. Qinzu saw that it looked aggrieved, and his anger was even greater. He pointed at its head and cursed. You guy, you are still aggrieved. Such a precious animal was harmed by you, and you are still aggrieved. After being said by the owner, Cheese did not dare to show a wronged look anymore, but in his heart he complained about his unscrupulous owner. I harmed it. That was not your order. You also know that it is a precious animal. Why didn't you say it when I asked me to deal with it? After cursing for a while, Qinzu finally realized that the most important thing now was to see if the guy could be saved. So, Qinzu quickly ran in the direction where the target fell, and Daha and Xiaohe followed closely behind. The two guys now looked humble, fearing that the big guy would notice them. The scene just now was so brutal that the two little guys were so scared that their legs went limp. Especially when they saw that arrogant guy just now flying directly into the sky, the two guys were even more frightened. Although, well, depending on the situation, this guy is on their side, but what if he doesn't like his brother? Not to mention flying into the sky, even if he was hit lightly, he wouldn't be able to bear it. While thinking wildly, the two little guys followed Qinzu to the place where the arrogant guy just landed. After seeing the scene in front of him, the second little one made up his mind to be obedient. The alligator snapper is not in a good condition now. It is covered in blood and its shell is broken. It looks dying and is not far from going to heaven. Qinzu looked at it and hesitated. Is he going to let this guy die like this? No, he can't let it die. Although he wants to teach it a lesson, he has never thought of killing it. It is said that a 1,000-year-old turtle is worth 10,000 years old. Neither of them can be killed easily. After opening the system, Qinzu was about to strengthen the alligator snapper when he heard the cold voice of the system. Insufficient spiritual energy, unable to perform. What? Qinzu looked up in astonishment. Insufficient spiritual energy? Yes, host, your current spiritual energy value is insufficient. Qinzu looked at his attributes. Sure enough, in the spiritual energy column, it clearly showed 5 ornithundreds. He was scratching his head. Why is it so little? And if there is no spiritual energy, what should he do? Should he not save it? Qinzu hesitated. Host, you can exchange for spiritual energy liquid. The system seemed to be unable to bear it and reminded him. Spiritual energy liquid? What's the use of it? Qinzu asked subconsciously. However, after waiting for a long time, the system did not answer. It seemed that it was too lazy to answer such an idiotic question. In fact, the moment Qinzu asked, he regretted it. Isn't this nonsense? One is spiritual energy and the other is spiritual energy liquid. The names are so similar, is there any need to ask? So Qinzu did not ask again, but opened the system and exchanged a drop of spiritual energy liquid. However, looking at the emerald green crystal in his hand that exuded the breath of life, Qinzu was a little confused again. Should I feed it directly or soak it in water to give it a bath? The system spirit seemed to be unable to bear the stupid performance of its master, and reminded him. Host, the spiritual energy liquid can be placed directly on the target, and the target will automatically absorb it. Qinzu heard this and tentatively placed the emerald green crystal on the broken back of the giant alligator turtle. Just as Qinzu's hand left, a miracle happened. On the back of the alligator turtle, a green light flashed and the crystal disappeared. What shocked Qinzu even more was that the turtle back, which had been broken into 5 or 6 pieces, was restored to 2 pieces in the blink of an eye. The broken parts were now smooth and looked exactly the same as before. But why didn't they all match? Qinzu touched his chin and thought about it for a while, then opened the system and exchanged another crystal. This time, the effect was even more obvious. The broken turtle shell was now intact, leaving only the limbs and head, which were still bleeding bright red. Seeing this, Qinzu did not hesitate and exchanged 2 more crystals and put them on. Now, the 2 hind legs became intact. Qinzu knew what was going on, so he exchanged 4 more crystals and put them all on. Sure enough, the alligator turtle's external injuries were all healed in the blink of an eye, and even its breathing became stable, but it just hadn't woken up yet. Kinzu now stood up with confidence, clapped his hands, and motioned Cheese to come over. Seeing his master calling, Cheese swam over happily, nodding and rubbing against Kinzu, hoping to correct the mistake he had just made. Kinzu was annoyed, slapped this guy on the head, and said, "Listen to me, take this guy and put it at the door of the villa. If you kill it, I will beat you to death." Cheese looked at the unconscious alligator turtle and nodded hurriedly. As long as it didn't die, he was relieved. So he rolled up his big tail and swam quickly towards the door of the villa under Kinzu's stunned gaze. "Damn it, if you hurt the alligator turtle again, I will deduct 3 days of food expenses from you." Kinzu shouted angrily from behind. Thanks to Fengxi and Mighty Nation for their support. Thanks to Kanye for the reward of 588 book coins. Thanks to LFKW for the reward of 1000 starting coins. I will add another chapter. Chapter 463. Arrangements for the female soldiers. The first thing Kinzu did when he returned to the villa was to see the alligator turtle. Fortunately, it didn't seem to have any problems. So, Kinzu waved his hand and sent Cheese back. There were so many people here, it would be bad if he scared people. When Cheese disappeared from everyone's sight, Daha and Xiaohe breathed a sigh of relief, opened their mouths and stuck out their tongues, and breathed in the fresh air. Long life freedom. Before the two guys could sigh for long, Kinzu left them a task, which was to guard the fainted alligator turtle. Looking at the two little guys, with their heads drooping in a listless look, Kinzu worriedly instructed, "Stay away from it, if you get bit, I can't save you." After being frightened by Kinzu, the two guys' spirits improved a little. They looked at each other and, at the same time, stayed away from the dangerous guy. At this time, the two little guys were extremely depressed. Why couldn't they grow up? Why couldn't they do anything? When Kinzu walked into the villa, Eva poked her head out of the kitchen and asked, "Clean, what's going on? Has the alligator snapper been sent back to the lake?" "Not yet." Kinzu replied weakly. Looking at Eva's inquiring eyes, Kinzu explained helplessly, "Cheese was too cruel, and the alligator snapper fainted." "What?" Eva opened her sexy little mouth and looked at Kinzu with a suspicious expression. "You mean, the alligator snapper fainted?" "Yes, it fainted. I brought it back. It's at the door." Touching his nose, Kinzu could only bite the bullet and admit it. He couldn't tell the truth, could he? The most important thing is that even if he told the truth, someone would have to believe it. Eva walked out with some doubts, and soon came back with a weird expression on her face. The alligator snapper really fainted. Is this guy so timid? But how did it dare to attack old John at the time? Or is Cheese even scary now? Kinzu shrugged and said with a smile, "Okay, don't think too much, it's just a big alligator turtle, just wait for it to wake up and rush back." Eva nodded in agreement and turned back to the kitchen. Kinzu fell into deep thought on the sofa. He didn't expect that the spiritual liquid would have such a good effect. A few drops can make a severely disabled person's appearance restored to its original state. If even the internal injuries in the body can be restored so quickly, then what are the accidents? That means that he only needs 10,000 points to sweep all the major doctors and top hospitals. But Kinzu was just thinking about it. If he really did that, he would probably appear in Area 51 before tomorrow. What for? Dissection. How can he get away with offending so many interest groups? Forget it, anyway, he has enough money to spend, there is no need to offend so many people, at most he can just save those who were related to him. For example, those disabled female soldiers in Revere Hospital. Thinking about so many beautiful girls who became like this because of saving him, Kinzu felt a little bit sorry. But how to get them to the ranch? Going to the hospital directly to save people is not an option. Taking out his cell phone, Kinzu called Dale. "Dale, how is Erica's injury?" Dale looked at Erica, who was smiling like a flower on the bed, sighed in his heart, and walked out of the ward with his cell phone. "Boss, the situation is not too optimistic. The doctor said that she can't recover. Erica can only lie in bed in the future." Kinzu also frowned. If this is the case, it will be even more difficult to deal with. When can they be discharged? Dale was stunned for a moment, and said, "If they can be discharged, it will be after a while. After all, there is no hope. Just go back and recuperate." Kinzu nodded, thought for a while, organized his words, and said, "Well, Dale, when they can be discharged, you can bring them all to the manor. The scenery and environment here are good. Let them recuperate here. Is it possible? Dale was a little tempted, but when she looked back at the ward, she was a little unsure. Qinzu encouraged her here. Go and try. When I was a child, I also studied a little with an old Chinese doctor at home. I will help them here. Dale's eyes suddenly lit up, and her breathing became faster. Is it Chinese medicine? Boss, are you serious? Well, why would I lie to you? We have to try as long as there is a little hope, right? Qinzu wiped the sweat from his forehead and thought to himself, Dale, I will only lie to you this time. Well, really? Dale didn't know what Qinzu was thinking. She agreed with joy, then suppressed her excitement and walked into the ward. Why? Is it your little Chinese boss? Erica teased with a smile on the bed. Dale smiled and ignored her teasing, but said, Erica, the boss invites you to recuperate in his manor after you are discharged from the hospital. Erica's expression froze, and the smile on her face disappeared. She sighed deeply, and after a long time, she said, Please thank him for his kindness for me. We won't bother you. Dale knew that she would not agree so easily, so she said, Erica, the boss has invited the best Chinese medicine master in China, and maybe he can cure you. Erica's expression relaxed a little, and she murmured to herself, Chinese medicine. Is there really any hope? After Qinzu hung up the phone, he put the matter aside for the time being. He did everything he could. If they didn't come, there would be nothing he could do. After walking out of the villa and taking a look, the workers were still busy not far behind. The pavilion had been built and was undergoing later decoration. The bluestone slabs in the river channel had been laid, and the corridor in the middle of the river channel was being constructed. Qinzu looked around and found that there were not many white construction workers inside. Now there were mainly Chinese construction masters, who were carefully carrying out the final decoration. After taking a look, Qinzu nodded with satisfaction. I believe that it will not be long before this place will be greatly changed. When they arrived at the door of the villa, Daha and Xiaohe were lying on the cobblestone pathboard, staring at the fountain not far away that was constantly spraying water. The alligator turtle had also woken up, but it lay on the ground and dared not move. It was looking around with its confused eyes, obviously not understanding the current situation. It could not forget the scene before it fell into a coma. The huge tail that fell from the sky made it think that it would definitely not survive. But where is this place now? Is it still alive? It's a new week. Please recommend, reward, subscribe and support. Chapter 464. Cowardly. Before it could think clearly, it saw the devilish man coming over, and it was so scared that it quickly closed its eyes again. And its heart, it kept repeating, can't see me, must not see me. It was really scared. Didn't it just show its teeth at him? It called a brutal guy to beat itself up like this. Qinzu looked at the alligator turtle pretending to be dead, and almost couldn't help laughing. Didn't it just show off its power and look like it didn't take itself seriously? Why is it so cowardly now? Turning his head to look around, Qinzu broke a branch from the side and began to poke the alligator turtle with a sly smile. The alligator turtle, which was originally going to play dead, had to open its eyes under Qinzu's poke. It didn't know what was going on outside. It didn't matter if it opened its eyes, it saw Qinzu in front of it, and it was so scared that it quickly moved its body back. Daha and Xiaohe on the side saw that the alligator turtle was awake, and they also became energetic. They got up and ran over meekly. Before the big alligator turtle could take a few steps back, it heard a barking sound from behind, which scared it so much that it quickly turned around and looked back. When it saw clearly that it was the two little guys, it breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, it was not that fears God. However, before it could swallow this breath, it felt that its shell was hit several times again. Turning back, Qinzu's familiar face appeared in front of it again, and the distance was so close. Hiccup, rolling his eyes, the guy couldn't bear the pressure and fainted again. Now it was Qinzu's turn to be dumbfounded. He and the two little guys looked at each other, and they all looked at each other. No way. What kind of courage is this? Can you faint from this? Touching his nose, Qinzu looked at the big alligator turtle depressedly, turned his head and told Daha and Xiaohe, "You, continue to watch it, and call me when it wakes up." After that, he turned around and went back to the villa without caring about the drooping head of the second child. It was not until dinner was almost ready that Xiaohe excitedly ran to Qinzu's side, picked up his trouser leg and dragged him out. Okay, stop biting. Is the guy awake? Qinzu smiled and picked up the little guy. Xiao Hector stretched comfortably in Qin Zhu's arms, and then barked a few times. Obviously the guy had woken up. When they got outside, as expected, the alligator snapping turtle had woken up, shaking its tail at the moment, lying on the fountain to drink water. And Da Hectares was following behind from a distance, neither close nor very far away. Seeing Qin Zhu come in, Da Hectares excitedly barked a few times. It was really fed up with this boring task. The alligator snapping turtle heard the sound behind it, turned its head to look, and its body trembled, lying there and dared not move. Qin Zhu smiled, took out some fresh vegetables that Eva had just picked from the basket in his hand and threw them over. The alligator snapping turtle was a little dazed. What does this mean? The last meal after execution? Qin Zhu didn't know what this guy was thinking. Seeing it was stunned, he picked up a branch and poked the vegetables. The tempting fragrance of the vegetables finally made it unable to bear the temptation, and it began to try to lower its head and take a bite. Then it carefully raised its head and looked at Qin Zhu. Seeing that he didn't react, it was relieved to eat with big mouthfuls. Qin Zhu was relieved. Don't let this guy starve to death just after rescuing him. In that case, wouldn't all his efforts be in vain? There were not many vegetables on the ground, and it was eaten up by it in just a few bites. However, the appetite of the alligator turtle is not satisfied by these vegetables. Moreover, it has not eaten for a whole afternoon, and now it is already starving. Therefore, it raised its head and looked at Qin Zhu pitifully, and dared not to show its teeth again. Qin Zhu smiled with satisfaction, took some more and threw them in front of it. This time, Qin Zhu tried to get closer to it. Although the alligator snapping turtle was a little nervous, it did not dare to move. It still lowered its head and ate the vegetables on the ground. For it, filling its stomach was the most important thing now. Daha followed Qin Zhu and saw that the alligator snapping turtle was eating so deliciously, and he couldn't help but feel a little confused. He also forgot Qin Zhu's instructions and walked directly to the mouth of the alligator snapping turtle and sniffed the vegetables carefully. There is a fragrance. Qin Zhu became nervous when he watched from the side, and quickly waved his hand, signaling Daha to come back. At the same time, he complained in his heart, this guy is too bold, right? If this bites you, I can't save you. Daha seemed to have noticed something was wrong. He raised his head and looked at the sharp teeth that were so close. His calves trembled a little, and he hurriedly backed away. The alligator snapping turtle looked at the little guy, then at Qin Zhu, and finally didn't dare to move his mouth. He also used his front paws to dig some vegetables over, signaling Daha to eat with confidence. Daha hurriedly shook his head. What a joke, eating in front of you, who knows if it's your trap, what if you give me a bite? Just when he wanted to retreat again, he was picked up by a big hand and placed in front of the separated leaves. Daha looked back and was immediately desperate. His unscrupulous master was looking at him with a smirk. Helpless, Daha raised his eyes to look at the giant alligator turtle close at hand, and smelled the fragrance of the vegetables. He gritted his teeth and ate it. Xiaohe looked at his brother sympathetically from behind. Fortunately, he was a step late. It was too dangerous. Thinking of this, Xiaohe couldn't help but step back a few steps, keeping a safer distance from the guys. Qin Zhu looked at Daha's helpless little look, and he was so happy in his heart. Let you be greedy and want to get close to others when you see them eating. Now it's good, right? Just when he was feeling proud, Eva's voice of rebuke came from behind him. Oh my god, Qin, how could you let Daha eat this? Turning back, in the evening sunset, Eva was standing behind him in a beige coat and an apron. The expression on her face was helpless with a hint of anger. Under the sunset, the corners of the water chestnuts became round, and the whole person's temperament seemed to be much more noble. Qin Zhu was a little dazed for a moment, and didn't hear what she said at all. It was not until Eva pinched him into satisfaction that Qin Zhu woke up. He scratched his head embarrassedly and asked awkwardly, Eva, what did you say just now? Eva couldn't help but roll her eyes at him charmingly, squatted down, and waved at the two little guys. Xiaohe walked over obediently, but Daha just looked back, but lowered his head to eat the leaves in front of him. It was as if what was placed in front of it at this moment was not a pile of wilted leaves, but a peerless delicacy. Alas, the chapter in the early morning will probably be posted tomorrow. I was drafted by the company to do hard labor, please give me some tips and recommendations to comfort me, it's so hot. Chapter 465 From today on, your name is Chuan. Eva was a little stunned. What was going on? Dogs love to eat rotten leaves. Or was Qin Zhu really so intimidating to them? Qinzhu also reacted at this time. It turned out that this girl came to defend Daha. Thinking of this, Qinzhu glared at Daha again. Just wait and see how I will deal with you in the future. However, the scene just now was really beautiful, and his heart was beating non-stop. Recalling the scene just now, Qinzhu was a little intoxicated again. After Daha finished eating the leaves in front of him one by one, he licked the residue on the edge of his mouth with his pink little tongue. Then he looked up at the small pile of vegetables in front of the alligator turtle, smacked his lips regretfully, and came to Qinzhu with a look back every 3 steps. Before it could reach Qinzhu, it was hugged by the anxious Eva and began to scold this guy for being careless. Qinzhu, on the other hand, looked at the empty marble floor in front of him with some surprise. When did Daha become a vegetarian? Thinking of this, Qinzhu looked up again and saw the alligator snapping turtle eating with gusto next to him. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration flashed through his mind. But when he thought about it carefully, he felt that he had not grasped the key point, and his mind was a little confused for a while. Clean, okay, let's go back to wheat. After teaching Daha a lesson, Eva stood up and pulled Qinzhu, indicating that he could go back. After being pulled by Eva, Qinzhu's mind became clear again, and he no longer thought about those messy things. He nodded and prepared to follow her back. You don't care about it? Eva pointed at the alligator snapping turtle and looked at Qinzhu with some curiosity. Qinzhu slapped his head and realized that he was really confused. After thinking for a while, Qinzhu picked up a branch and drove this guy into the fountain, and poured all the remaining vegetables on the edge of the fountain, ready to let it stay here for one night. Seeing Qinzhu's arrangement, Eva didn't say anything. After he was done, she took his arm and walked towards the villa. The alligator turtle lay in the water, blinking its little eyes at Qinzhu's departing back, but was hesitating in its hard weather to sneak away. It stood up and climbed out of the pool, but its eyes were attracted by a pile of vegetables on the side. After hesitating for a moment, the desire for food prevailed. So it flicked its tail, lowered its head and began to eat. Anyway, it was like this, and being full was the most important thing now. Therefore, when Qinzhu saw the alligator turtle sleeping soundly by the fountain early the next morning, a smile of success appeared at the corner of his mouth. It seems that this guy can't run away, so it's good, so let him stay and cooperate with me in the experiment. Before Qinzhu could figure out how to do the experiment, his cell phone rang. When he took it out and saw that it was Chen Mu's, he picked it up with a smile and asked, "What? Brother Chen, the display cabinet is ready so quickly." Chen Mu nodded in the office, not caring whether Qinzhu could see it or not, and answered with a little excitement, "Yes, boss, everything is ready." "When do we start?" "Then let's start tomorrow. I don't know much about this. You should watch it yourself. Anyway, the sooner the better." "Okay, boss, I got it." After hanging up the phone, Qinzhu came to the giant alligator turtle and gently touched it with his foot. The giant alligator turtle was a little unhappy to be disturbed in the daze, but when he looked up and saw the person come in, the unhappiness immediately disappeared without a trace. Moreover, the claws that were originally raised high immediately retracted, and he secretly complained in his heart, "Why did this evil star come?" Seeing that it did not resist, Qinzhu squatted down and gently touched its shell without a trace of scars with his hand, and was secretly surprised. It seems that this guy is not feeling well, which means that his injury has completely healed. Thinking of this, Qinzhu opened the system, exchanged another spiritual liquid, and then placed it directly on its back. As soon as the emerald green crystal touched the turtle shell, it immediately seemed to melt and slowly disappeared on the turtle shell. The reaction of the alligator turtle was also very strange. It squinted its eyes and hummed in comfort or discomfort. After a long time, this weird situation stopped. However, Qinzhu always felt that something was wrong. This guy in front of him seemed to be bigger. Rubbing his eyes, Qinzhu was sure that it really got bigger. Qinzhu couldn't sit still now. What a joke, how can this spiritual liquid make it bigger? Fortunately, he tested it again. If it was used directly on the group of female soldiers, wouldn't it make a bunch of giants? Thinking of this, Qinzhu couldn't help but shudder. The consequences were too terrible. Just as Qinzhu was lost in thought, 2 cars drove over from a distance on the small road of the ranch. Coming back to his senses, Qinzhu looked carefully and saw that one was Chen Mu's car and the other looked like a refrigerated truck. This guy, he came really fast. Qinzhu muttered twice and stood up. A moment later, the car stopped in an open space not far away, and Chen Mu opened the door and got out. Seeing Qinzhu, Shenmue greeted him excitedly with a suppressed smile on his face. After coming to Kinzu's side, he discovered the big alligator turtle next to him and teased with a smile. "Hey, boss, you really have the leisure time, are you walking the turtle?" Kinzu's face, which was originally full of smiles, immediately froze there, and he looked at Shenmue unhappily. Is this guy doing it on purpose? Shenmue was a little nervous when Kinzu stared at him. He coughed twice and changed the subject. "Well, boss, do you think I should transport the blue fine tuna back now? Now is the right time to advertise." Kinzu nodded, waved at him, and said, "Well, you go to the doctor, load it, I'll call Will." Shenmue left with a wry smile. He was also complaining in his heart, "Who told you to stare at a big turtle for no reason? Blame me." After Shenmue left, Kinzu turned his head to look at the giant alligator turtle, touched his nose and thought for a while, then said, "Well, you are with me now, so I will give you a name." Kinzu lowered his head and pondered for a long time. He couldn't think of a good name in his mind, so he said helplessly, "Then you will be called Chuan from now on, do you hear me?" The giant alligator turtle blinked his little eyes in confusion. What does it mean? Kinzu had no choice but to squat down and look at it, and said word by word, "You will be called Chuan from now on." Seeing that it was still blinking in confusion, Kinzu kicked it angrily, and then shouted, "Chuan, come here." Well, after being kicked, the alligator-snapping turtle, oh no, Chuan, finally understood what Kinzu meant. It turned out that he wanted to change his name. After understanding it, Chuan crawled back happily and looked at Kinzu pitifully. "Master, it's time for dinner." Chapter 466. Slow down, slow down. Kinzu rolled his eyes. It turned out that this guy was a foodie. He waved his hand helplessly and said, "Go find food by yourself. Remember, don't mess it up for me. Do you hear me?" After hearing what Kinzu said, the alligator turtle immediately excitedly wagged its tail and rushed to the vegetable garden. On the other side, Daha and Xiaohe, who had just finished breakfast, saw the alligator turtle's actions and also showed an eager expression. Before Kinzu could react, the two little guys, with Jerry and Tom, plus Dadu, who didn't know and he started playing with Jerry, ran to the vegetable garden together. This is not right. Kinzu narrowed his eyes unconsciously. If it was said that Daha's love of eating vegetarian food yesterday made Kinzu feel strange, then the performance of these guys today made Kinzu more certain. There must be some reason that he didn't know about. What could it be? Kinzu's eyes unconsciously looked at the alligator turtle Chuan. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration exploded in his mind. Aura. Yes, it must be because of the spiritual energy. The reason why foreigners think that the Chinese dishes they cook are delicious is definitely because of their cooking skills. On the other hand, it is because the vegetables contain spiritual energy, right? Vegetables grow in spiritual land, where there is sufficient spiritual energy, so they will be peeped at by the alligator turtle. It is not surprising why the alligator turtle Chuan, who is a carnivore and usually feeds on small fish and shrimp, would want to change his taste. However, Kinzu felt a little strange. It has been a few days since the vegetable garden was changed to spiritual land. Why did this happen now? Did he not pay attention before? Thinking of this, Kinzu could no longer sit still, turned back to the villa, went upstairs to his room. He took out the key to open the gun cabinet, looked at the several long guns inside, hesitated for a while, and took out the Remington. In terms of close-range lethality, shotguns are still more powerful. Seeing Kinzu coming out with a gun, Dale, who was sitting on the sofa in the living room, immediately became restless. She stood up and asked with concern, "Clean, what happened?" Kinzu shook his head, "Nothing." After thinking for a while, he turned around and said, "Dale, come with me." Dale was a little puzzled, but she still went back to the house to take out her M16 and followed Kinzu out. Outside, Kinzu tied the protective gear on his shoulders and blew a loud whistle at the sky. A moment later, a loud eagle cry came from the sky, and it flapped its wings that covered the sky and the sun, and slowly landed. Let's go to the woods together." After calling Dale next to him, Kinzu picked up his Remington and walked into the woods. Dale looked at her boss in confusion. What was he doing? Although she was confused, she followed Kinzu and entered the woods together. Not sure if it was his illusion, but as soon as Kinzu entered the woods, he felt the air become lighter and his whole body floated. After walking a little further in, the sunlight began to become sparse, blocked outside the woods by the thick branches and leaves. The woods that used to be bustling seemed to become quiet at this time, so quiet that it made people feel a little depressed. Boss, something seems to be wrong here. At this time, Dale also noticed something different. This place is not the same as before. Maybe she didn't care and didn't notice it at ordinary times, but now Dale is on full alert and naturally felt it. Kinzu nodded. Yes, I suspect there are a lot of uninvited guests here. We have to be careful. Dale's expression became serious, loaded the M16 bullet in his hand, and looked around with sharp eyes, guarding against possible unexpected situations. Woof woof woof. The sudden barking of dogs made Kinzu, who was on full alert, suddenly alert. He aimed the Remington in his hand subconsciously, and almost pulled the trigger. It was Dale who reacted quickly. He grabbed the muzzle of Kinzu's gun, raised it and pointed it to the sky, and shouted, "Boss, don't get excited, this is Daha." Kinzu breathed a sigh of relief after hearing this, and his nervous heart gradually calmed down. Looking at Daha running over with his tail wagging not far away, he looked at the sky speechlessly. "Damn, this bastard, I will deal with you when I get back." However, after Daha interrupted him, Kinzu's nervousness was reduced a lot. His current state was just a little too nervous. Because a small vegetable field attracted a big alligator turtle, he couldn't imagine how many unknown creatures there would be in this huge forest. He didn't mean to make trouble for nothing and wanted to drive all these guys away, but at the very least, he had to make sure that there were no large carnivores outside the forest. Otherwise, the workers and cowboys in the manor might be in danger if they don't pay attention. "Da hectares, shall hectares, you go ahead." Since the two guys came over by themselves, Kinzu was not polite and asked the two guys to go ahead to explore the way. Da hectares and shall hectares didn't know what Kinzu was thinking. They thought they were going to find truffles again. Thinking of the food and subsidies they were rewarded that day, the two guys became energetic and began to turn around. Kinzu, who was behind, was a little dazed. What were these two guys doing? When he saw Da hectares stop in front of a pine tree and keep barking at him, Kinzu seemed to understand something. "You mean, there are truffles here?" Kinzu came to Da hectares and looked at the traces of digging next to him. He was a little uneasy. Da hectares nodded as a matter of course, but still looked at Kinzu with some doubts. The meaning was obvious. "Didn't you ask us to do this?" Kinzu coughed twice and looked at the land under Da's feet, and he was a little entangled. "Damn it, I'm here to look for unknown creatures today. I asked you to go to the front so that you can explore the way, not to look for truffles. However, this is a truffle. What if I just leave it like this and someone else gets it first? But now I have nothing in my hands. Should I go back and get a shovel? This is really a problem." After thinking for a while, Kinzu reluctantly pushed Daha away, which stunned Daha, who was waiting for praise. "Daha, Shauha, listen, let's go forward. Don't look for this thing first. Pay attention to other things." The two guys nodded as if they understood something, but also as if they didn't understand anything. However, they still trotted forward obediently, looking relaxed and comfortable, which made Kinzu a little tired. Kinzu hurriedly stopped the two guys and said helplessly, slow down, we have to go in little by little." Before he finished speaking, a slightly teasing voice came from the distance, slow down, we have to go in little by little." Chapter 467. "Ah, stinky bird, get out of here now." Not only Kinzu was not calm, but even Dale, who had been calm all the time, subconsciously raised the M16 inches her hand. "Who? Come out." She was sure that she had never heard this voice before, which meant that it was definitely not someone she was familiar with. She looked at Kinzu beside her, wondering if it was someone the boss knew. Noticing Dale's doubts, Kinzu raised the Remington in his hand and looked around subconsciously, while saying, "Don't look at me, I don't know this person either." Hearing what Kinzu said, Dale felt relieved, and moved forward slowly, aiming the gun in her hand from time to time. However, after a long time, she still couldn't find the owner of the voice. It was as if she had suddenly disappeared after teasing Kinzu, leaving no trace. After wandering around for a while, Dale put down his gun in a somewhat decadent state, muttering to himself, "This shouldn't be the case, this shouldn't be the case, how could there not even be a footprint left? How did this person do it?" Kinzu was also a little nervous. This spiritual land wouldn't breed any legendary mountain spirits and wild monsters, right? If a ginseng dollar really came out, that would be really big. However, after a lot of exploration, the two gave up, as there really wasn't anything valuable left. "Let's go, keep going inside, we've only walked in less than 100 meters, and that's it." While shaking the remington in his hand, Kinzu encouraged himself in his heart, and at the same time, he didn't forget to comfort Dale next to him. However, Dale was not an ordinary person. Before Kinzu could finish his words of comfort, Dale decisively raised the M16, and a crisp gunshot was heard, and not far away, an animal similar to a fox fell down. Daha and Xiaohe didn't know what fear was, and when they found prey, they immediately ran up excitedly. Unfortunately, the body is too small. Even if the prey has fallen, they can't do much to it. Finally, Daha was irritated and pounced on it, starting to bite the tough fur of the prey. The sound of the gunshot was like a signal, and the woods began to become lively. Wild rabbits were rampant, pheasants were rampant, and all kinds of prey of different sizes could be seen along the way. Dale, what's going on? Kinzu frowned slightly, with a puzzled expression. Dale shook his head. Boss, as you said, there should be a big guy here. Kinzu's heart moved. The big guy. Yes, how could I forget this guy? Thinking of this, Kinzu began to summon cheese in his heart. At this time, he realized that he also had a big guy here, but because he was sent out to do something, it seemed that it was no longer possible. There was no way. Although Kinzu brought Haha, this was not a plane, not his home court. So since it entered the woods, it has been very silent, just staring with eyes wide open and looking around vigilantly. But after looking for a long time, it was helpless. As I said before, this is not its home ground. Dale just warned Kinzu to be careful. She didn't care about this place. A moment later, there was a rustling sound behind Kinzu and the others, and then a huge golden tongue appeared in front of them. Dale subconsciously reached out for the gun, but Kinzu was quick at this time and pressed the gun down. Dale, this is Cheese, one of us. Dale nodded, loosened the pistol, and looked at the big guy nervously. Cheese, come here, are there other big guys here? Cheese blinked, not knowing what his master meant, but he couldn't help but swim over and rub against him. Now, Kinzu and his friends can be regarded as no one dares to mess with them. That big guy alone is enough to deter all the villains. However, things always go against one's will. Just as the two of them were advancing inside with Cheese, a vague voice came back again. Cheese, come here, are there other big guys here? Cheese blinked his big eyes blankly, turned around. Who called me? After seeing Kinzu, he ran over excitedly and kept rubbing Kinzu's thighs. A good pair of jeans must be dyed. But Kinzu and Dale were not so relaxed. It was the second time. Who was hiding in the dark? Looking at each other blankly, the two of them strengthened their vigilance and continued to walk inside. Along the way, the voice did not appear again, and some small animals were quietly nibbling on the weeds on the ground. Is the spiritual land really that scary? Kinzu felt like crying because he saw a few wolves. However, this was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that these guys were nibbling on the grass very kindly. Dale was also full of doubts. She looked at the wolves lying on the ground, shivering all over. When did the wolves become so timid? Moreover, they were actually eating grass. Dale rubbed her eyes and looked at all this in disbelief. When they got here, they had already entered the center of the 6-acre forest. Kinzu turned his head and looked around, nodded with satisfaction. In this case, let's go back. Go back? Dale opened her sexy red lips and couldn't help but exclaimed, no way. After walking for a long time, I finally got in. Now I have to go back without doing anything. Are you kidding me? Kinzu coughed twice, facing Dale's murderous eyes, and explained. I just came in to take a look. Now I have seen enough, of course I have to go back. He now has an idea in his mind. It seems that it is indeed because of the spiritual land. The spiritual land, like those caves and blessed lands in novels, is very attractive to small animals. However, he has not figured out what the difference is between the plants and animals growing in the spiritual land and the ordinary ones. However, there is no rush. There is plenty of time. He believes that he will find the reason. Dale on the side nodded helplessly. Okay, let's go back. As he said that, he put away the M16 and turned to walk forward. There is no way. Who let this be his boss? He will do whatever he says. Kinzu smiled, called Daha and Xiaohe, and prepared to rush back. Only then did Kinzu realize that after these two guys came here, they became humble and obedient, and they didn't have the arrogance just now. Kinzu was a little amused. These two little bullies. There was no choice but to kick the two little guys with his feet. Okay, let's go back. Hearing that they could finally go back, the little guys became energetic again. Here, they always felt that something was wrong in the dark. It was as if they were regarded as prey by an unknown monster and could die at any time. At this time, a slightly teasing voice sounded again. Okay, let's go back. Before the voice fell, Kinzu felt his shoulder suddenly tightened, and Ha-Ha flew up from his shoulder and flew straight to a place. At the same time, a scream also rang out. You stinky bird, get out of here, don't bite me, you bastard. Chapter 468 McGaw. Kinzu and the other man looked at each other, and quickly ran a few steps to catch up. After turning around a few big trees and bypassing a few bushes, Kinzu was stunned by the scene in front of him. This, pointing at the creature in front of him that was pressed under Ha-Ha and was still cursing, Kinzu stuttered and didn't know what to say. It was an unknown bird with a body length of about 40 centimeters, colorful all over, and a tuft of white hair on its head. When seeing someone come in, this unknown strange bird not only did not stop shouting, but shouted even more vigorously. Help! Someone's been killed! Help! Someone's been killed! At this time, Dale, who was standing by, was obviously relieved. He put down the gun in his hand and said with a smile, Boss, this is a McGaw. I've heard that they are very smart, but I didn't expect them to be so smart. Is this a parrot? Can there be such a smart parrot? Kinzu was a little amused when he saw the parrot, which was only gently pressed by Ha-Ha and didn't dare to move. Instead, it kept shouting for help. Ha-Ha, boss, don't underestimate these guys. They are all very smart. Dale took a few steps forward and came to Ha-Ha. He took the colorful macaw from its claws. Thank you, you were a good person. As soon as it was rescued, the little guy tilted his head to look at Kinzu and the others, and the sound coming out of his mouth was so clear. Boss, maybe it was trained by someone. Let's release it. Dale turned around and asked tentatively. Kinzu was a little reluctant to let it go after hearing that it was going to be released. He had never seen a parrot in his life. Turning his head, Kinzu carefully looked at the bird that Dale called McGaw. Most of the little guy's body was bright red, and the bare skin near the eyes and cheeks had inconspicuous red horizontal feathers. Some red feathers on the back of the head had yellow wedges, and a large part of the head and body were bright red. The neck and upper flaps were bright red, the feathers of the lower flaps were red and yellow, and the mandibles were black. The skin before the eyes and the exposed cheeks was white. The middle cover feathers of the upper layer of the wings were yellow with a little green at the tip, the main flight feathers on the outer edge were blue, and the cover feathers near the tail and the inner side were light blue. The red feathers above the tail had a little blue at the tip of the outer edge, the tail and the inner side of the wings were red, the upper beak was ivory white with a little black, the middle of the lower beak was black, the iris was yellow, and the legs and claws were black. Looking at this colorful macaw, Kinzu was even more reluctant to part with it, and couldn't help asking, how do you know that it was trained by someone else? Dale's mouth curled up slightly. She didn't expect that her boss liked parrots. But thinking about the small animals at home, Dale felt relieved again. This is a typical pet lover. Boss, if this is just wild, it can't be so smart. It must have been trained by someone else. If you like parrots, we can go to Revere Pet Store to buy one. Is that so? Okay, let's spare it this time. Hearing that there are some for sale, Kinzu's mind faded, nodded, and agreed to Dale's suggestion. Hearing this, Dale let go of the hand holding the parrot, raised his hands up, and threw this guy into the sky with force. Perhaps because it was not prepared, the parrot did not take off successfully as the two expected, but flapped its wings a few times in the air and fell vertically. The bird is dead, you are all bad guys, the bird is dead. The little parrot flapped its wings on the ground, trying to stand up, and kept muttering, bad guys, all bad guys. Kinzu and Dale looked at each other, what was going on? After all, women are more careful. Dale thought of something, walked forward, picked up the parrot again, and found that one of the little guy's wings seemed to be injured. Boss, this guy seems to be injured. Dale looked at Kinzu with some shame, she really didn't see it just now. Come to think of it, what kind of power is that? Such a little guy was directly pressed down from midair by it, and it was lucky that he didn't die. Then take it back first, and let it go after it heals its wounds. Touching his nose, Kinzu made up his mind. It happened that he was curious about the guy now, so he took it back first. As if he had noticed the thoughts of the two, the little parrot, who was not quiet, started shouting again. Help! Help! The bad guys are going to take Heidi away. Kinzu was amused to see the little guy in Dale's hands, shouting for help. This guy is also afraid. Ha-ha, who had returned to Kinzu's shoulder, seemed to be a little annoyed by the noise, and directly made an eagle cry at the little parrot. Ha-ha's voice was so penetrating, and the distance was so close that Kinzu's ears fell into a state of temporary deafness. Shaking his somewhat dazed head, Kinzu patted his ears hard with his hands, but still felt a little confused. Looking at Ha-ha on his shoulder fiercely, Kinzu gritted his teeth and said, "Ha-ha, if you dare to get so close and scream so loudly next time, I will feed you cheese." Ha-ha, who was originally very happy to see the little parrot shut up, shuddered all over when he heard Kinzu say that. Thinking of the natural enemy, Ha-ha became a little depressed. He really couldn't beat the guy now. Seeing that Ha-ha had calmed down, Kinzu looked at the little parrot in Dale's hand. The little guy was still a little confused and didn't understand what happened. He only knew that there was a golden star in front of his eyes. "It's over, I'm going to die, Master. Heidi was wrong, I shouldn't have sneaked out." After thinking about this, the little guy's neck tilted and fainted. "Ah? Dale, what happened to it?" The little parrot fainted like this, which scared Kinzu. Could it be like what the book said, that it was scared to death by breaking its internal organs? Dale was also a little anxious. Regardless of her uncomfortable ears, she quickly tried the little parrot with her hand. After a long time, Dale let go of her hand and breathed a sigh of relief. "It's not dead, there is still a heartbeat, probably fainted from fear." At this point, Dale looked up and looked at Ha-ha with a strange look in her eyes. This guy's cry was not right. They had heard the sound of an eagle before, how could it be so powerful? It made her feel uncomfortable. Kinzu didn't care about Dale's look. Hearing what she said, he felt relieved and patted Ha-ha's little head with his hand. "Did you hear me? If you dare to bark so close next time, I will really feed you cheese." Ha-ha shuddered, subconsciously folded his wings, and nodded his little head as if he accepted his fate. Dale looked curious and was about to ask something when he heard the nervous barking of Daha and Xiaohe not far away. Kinzu's face tightened, and before Dale could speak, he ran over first, holding his Remington tightly in his hand. "Boss, be careful, I'll go first." Dale caught up with Kinzu in a few steps, walked around the big tree next to him, and ran towards the direction where Daha's barking came from with a gun in hand. Thanks to LFKW for the reward of 500 Kidian coins, and thanks to Fengxi, Wendefulai, and Afaji for their reward support. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a Mundo Fanfic Novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en sinis fuetzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo Fanfic Novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas incredibles. Chapter 469 Husky Brothers with great changes. After passing a few bushes, Kinzu and his partner returned to the place where they had just started. The scene in front of them made him gasp. In a bush not far from the little guy, a fat wild boar that looked to be at least 500 to 600 kilograms was baring its teeth and digging the soil with its hind legs, looking fiercely at the big and small huskies on the opposite side. However, these two little huskies, who were usually lazy and a little silly, did not give in at all at this moment. They bent their bodies, their white hair exploded, and they barked at the big wild boar in two directions like two hedgehogs. The arrival of Kinzu and his partner broke the slightly dull atmosphere between the guys. It just didn't get better, but made the atmosphere more tense. Daha and Xiaohe were much more relaxed, shaking their tails with a look of joy, but their eyes were still fixed on the big wild boar on the opposite side. The big wild boar on the opposite side saw the sudden appearance of two people, and its eyes shrank for a moment, and its hind legs ducked faster, as if it was ready to charge at any time. "Boss, you retreat first, leave this to me." Dale took the Remington from Kinzu's hand, and without waiting for his answer, he rushed to the side with a few steps, and decisively pulled the trigger at the wild boar that was still accumulating strength. With a tongue of fire from the Remington, the wild boar on the opposite side staggered involuntarily and fell to the ground, with blood dripping from its head. Just as Kinzu clapped his hands and cheered, the wild boar that fell to the ground used its limbs to exert force and staggered to climb up again. After being injured, the wild boar became more ferocious and its eyes became more fierce. Fortunately, the wild boar had limited intelligence after all. When it saw that it was Dale who injured it, it immediately gave up the two little guys in front of it and rushed towards Dale like crazy. Dale remained calm and evaded a few times between the trees, causing the wild boar to crash into a tree that could be hugged by one person. Take advantage of someone's weakness to kill him. Although Dale had never heard of this saying, it did not prevent her from understanding the meaning of the saying. Just as the wild boar staggered and climbed up again, Dale aimed at the wild boar's head and fired another shot. Kinzu smacked his lips in regret. Such good pig head meat was blown to pieces. This Dale was such a waste. Fortunately, Dale did not know Kinzu's thoughts, otherwise, he would definitely not mind letting Kinzu face the wild boar again. A wild boar of this size is not something that can be solved simply with a gun. If you can't kill it with one shot, its burst speed and the terrible impact force will cost you your life. As for how terrible it is, just look at the big tree next to it that was just hit by the wild boar. Boss, it's okay. Dale walked back and returned the gun to Kinzu. I have to admit that it is more fun to use Remington to fight such a big guy. Kinzu gave Dale a thumbs up. Well done, Dale. Dale smiled and said nothing, but cast his eyes on the two little guys on the ground. Kinzu followed Dale's gaze and cast his eyes on Daha and Xiaohe on the ground, and his eyes became a little different. As expected, they are the blood of Siberian wolves, which is different. If it were an ordinary dog, even if it had been trained, it would tremble all over when it saw such a big guy, right? Little guys, you did a good job. I will give you a snack when I go back. Kinzu smiled and squatted down, stroking the soft hair of Daha and Xiaohe. However, that circle of swimming rings made Kinzu feel that it ruined the atmosphere, and he made up his mind that these two guys must lose weight. To Kinzu's surprise, although the two guys wagged their tails faster when they heard about the snack, they still looked at the place where the big wild boar had just stayed with vigilant eyes. A warning sound of woo came out of his throat, as if warning the guys inside to put down their weapons and surrender. At the same time, the bushes where the wild boar had just been shook, as if there was something inside. Dale, who was leaning against a big tree and watching Kinzu's actions, became alert. With her weapon in hand, she carefully bypassed the two little guys and moved towards the bushes. At the same time, she felt a little ashamed. She thought it was just a big wild boar. After solving it, she felt a little relaxed. She didn't expect it to have accomplices. Thinking of these guys, she almost embarrassed herself in front of Kinzu, and Dale's pace quickened. Seeing Dale's actions, the two little huskies were not to be outdone. They looked at each other and ignored Kinzu's obstruction. They split into two groups and rushed to the back of the bushes. Woof 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 woof. A crisp dog bark sounded behind the bushes, accompanied by a greater commotion in the bushes. After a while, the bushes parted on both sides, and 7 or 8 sturdy little wild boars, not much bigger than Daha, ran out in fear. Kinzu raised his eyebrows when he saw this. Another little wild boar. Dale was also a little stunned, and the anger in his heart disappeared. He turned around and looked at him with an asking look. Keep it for now, and go back to raise it together with the last one. Touching his nose, Kinzu looked at Daha and Xiaohe who were watching over the little wild boar not far away, and he didn't know what to say. These two guys are now completely different, and they seem very excited. No wonder the army has to hold exercises from time to time. Just look at the two little guys and you will know. Isn't this completely different from being in the villa? Dale nodded, didn't say anything, but quietly waited for Kinzu's arrangement. Kinzu glanced around and felt a little depressed. Is the temptation of the spiritual land so great? You know, this place is close to the center of the ranch. Although it is also a large forest, it is not connected to the mountains, but is closer to the sea. So where did these guys come from? On the way back with Dale carrying the big wild boar, Kinzu has been struggling with this problem. How should he deal with it? Until he returned to the door of the villa, Kinzu still had no clue. The big wild boar was thrown directly into the open space at the door. The little wild boars driven back by Daha and Xiaohe were huddled together, trembling a little. The big alligator turtle Chuan was wandering around them at this moment, showing a very interested look. On the grass next to them, the squirrels Jerry and Tom were lying on their backs basking in the sun. Even Dadu, who had never left the house, was shaking his long ears and jumping around next to the rockery. What's going on? Did they all take stimulants? Kinzu was confused. Could it be that vegetables also have the effect of stimulating excitement? Chapter 470 Old John's worry. Shaking his head, Kinzu ignored the group of guys. He went back to the villa to take a shower, and then sat down on the sofa in the living room. Boss, where did you find such a group of little guys? The little wild boar at Eva's door asked Kinzu curiously. Didn't he see him go up the mountain? It's in the woods at the door. There are a lot of big guys in it. I'm going to find John to discuss it. Kinzu rubbed his head with a headache, took out his mobile phone and called John. In the woods at the door. Eva opened her mouth wide when she heard it. No way. Clean, it's been so long, and there haven't been any big guys in it. Kinzu put down the phone and smiled bitterly twice. How can he explain this? Maybe it's because there are truffles in it. You know, this guy is not only liked by people, but also by animals, especially wild boars. As he spoke, Kinzu was stunned. Damn, wild boars must not be allowed to enter the woods again. This is Kinzu's only thought now. If you don't say it, you won't remember that wild boars are also good at finding truffles. Even nodded thoughtfully, maybe. At this time, Dale also came down, wiped her wet long hair, and said, there are not only wild boars in there, but also wolves, and perhaps even brown bears. Eva didn't react to this, but Kinzu was stunned, swallowing his saliva involuntarily. Dale, are you sure? Brown bears. Dale nodded casually. There should be. I saw traces of their activities. Dale suddenly remembered something and asked, what should we do with the parrot? Should we save it? Kinzu reacted and slapped his thigh, almost forgetting this. Where did you put the little parrot? Let me take a look. Dale pointed upstairs. She put the guy in the garden on the second floor. Kinzu didn't say anything else, and got up and walked upstairs. After Kinzu left, Eva looked at her sister curiously. Have you been inside? Yes, Dale nodded gently and said, it has changed inside. Not only are there many more animals, but even the plants are much more lush. Eva blinked her big eyes, which exuded strange colors. She didn't care about the changes Dale mentioned, but smiled mischievously. Did he take you there alone? Dale also realized the meaning of Eva's words at this time, and rolled her eyes helplessly. I am his bodyguard. If he doesn't take me, who else can he take? Eva laughed softly a few times and didn't say anything, but the teasing laughter and the mischievous eyes made Dale a little fidgety. It was originally a normal patrol of the forest, but after Eva said this, it seemed as if the two of them were on a date alone. Just when I was feeling a little confused, there was a sound of horse hooves at the door, and John pushed the door and walked in. Looking at Dale sitting on the sofa, John took off his cowboy hat, showed a kind smile, and greeted. Hi, Dale, good afternoon, where is the boss? Dale raised her head, forced a smile, pointed upstairs, indicating that Kinzu was on the second floor. Seeing Dale's smile, John was frightened. When did this female bodyguard, who usually had a blank expression, smile like this? Did something happen? Thinking of this, John's pace quickened a lot. Then I'll go upstairs to find that boss first, and we'll talk later. When John's footsteps disappeared from sight, Dale rubbed her face with a bitter smile, and muttered to herself. This damn girl, she just knows how to scare me. Let me see how I deal with you. John went up to the second floor, pushed open a door at the end of the corridor, and saw Kinzu sitting on a recline with a colorful macaw standing on his hand. Stranger, what are you doing here? The sudden voice made John pause. This was not Kinzu's voice, he was sure. He looked up and looked around, but didn't see anyone else. Could it be? Hey, stranger, here, look here. The little parrot stood on Kinzu's shoulder, flapping its wings, as if it wanted to jump up, but it was quickly held down by Kinzu. Be quiet. Kinzu rubbed his head with a headache. He had just fed this guy a drop of spiritual liquid, and its injury, which was not serious to begin with, healed in a moment. After the recovery, the little guy became much closer to him, just as Kinzu expected. This was originally a good thing, but if there was suddenly a chatterbox around him who could not stop chirping, that feeling would not be too good. Boss, what is this? Macaw? John walked to Kinzu and sat down with a surprised face, and asked tentatively. Yes, macaw. Kinzu nodded, confirming John's guess. It's really smart. Boss, when did you train it? It took a lot of time, didn't it? This was also what John was most puzzled about. Seeing that the parrot was so smart, it didn't look like it was just captured, but he didn't see the boss training it normally. Kinzu chuckled twice, lifted the little guy up and gestured to John, and then said, I just found it in the woods. Picked it up. John's head was filled with black lines. No way. Seeing John's unbelieving look, Kinzu didn't say anything, but changed the subject and said, John, I asked you to come here today mainly because of the forest at the door. As he said that, Kinzu pointed to the woods not far away. John followed Kinzu's gesture and looked at the woods, smiling and said, Boss, what's wrong? This is still a windbreak planted in the last century. Kinzu was relieved a little. He was still wondering at first. The forest coverage rate in the United States is already very high. Why would they plant such a large forest here? It was used as a windbreak. Come to think of it, this place is so close to the sea. If there is no windbreak to cover it, it may become part of the ocean someday. It was nothing at first, but when Dale and I went in today, we found a lot of large carnivores. It's very unsafe for people working on the ranch. Huh. John looked at Kinzu in confusion. Is this a joke? Boss, are you sure? There are fences around our ranch. If a large beast really comes in, it means that the fence has been destroyed. Kinzu pointed to the wild boar that had not been dealt with at the door of the villa. Look, it was just killed in the woods, not far from the villa. Old John had seen the big wild boar and he came just now. Like Eva, he also thought that Kinzu went into the mountains to kill it, but he didn't expect it to be killed in the woods. Standing up, Old John looked serious. Boss, I'll take people to see where the fence is broken. Chapter 471. The master came to the door. Kinzu nodded and said, let's go and have a look, especially the woods. We need to strengthen the fence. Old John agreed, picked up his cowboy hat and went downstairs. He had to deal with this matter quickly. Although Kinzu didn't say anything, he still felt that it was his dereliction of duty. After all, he was in charge of the ranch, and now this kind of thing happened, he didn't even know about it. After Old John left, Kinzu let go of the little parrot. It's so boring, so boring. Shaking the little head, Kinzu felt that the little guy spoke English better than his own. Okay, little guy, where are you from? Where is your owner? Kinzu tapped the little parrot's head with his hand, motioning it to look at him. The little parrot tilted its head and just looked at Kinzu without saying anything. After a long time, in Kinzu's puzzled eyes, it timidly asked, aren't you Heidi's owner? Kinzu was stunned. No way. It's its owner now. If its original owner knew about this, wouldn't he be furious? What you think will come true? Just when Kinzu was struggling with why this guy's loyalty was so low, the phone next to him rang. Boss, a lady came to the ranch gate. She said her macaw was lost and wanted to come in to look for it. Old John's voice on the other end of the phone was a little weird. Could it be that the little guy was really picked up? Especially looking at the fashionable and beautiful little girl at the door, Old John smiled even more brightly. Kinzu was a little depressed. No way. He came to the door so soon. Looking at the little guy in his hand, Kinzu had a headache. How should he explain it later? Could it be that your thing betrayed itself and it has nothing to do with me? After a long silence, Kinzu couldn't think of any good solution, so he had no choice but to say, well, Old John, let her come in and have a look. After hanging up the phone, Old John pulled the reins and said to the woman at the door with a smile, our boss has agreed. Go in. Go straight along this road and you will see the villa. The boss will be waiting for you there. Hearing this, Haley Bloomer nodded happily, thank you, uncle. I'll go in first. As she said that, she turned around and opened the door of a bright red luxury sports car next to her and got in. After starting the car, Haley even lowered the window and waved to Old John. What a sensible girl. Old John waved at the sports car and muttered with a smile. However, through the lowered window, he seemed to see another macaw with the same bright colors. Hey, Peter, you'll see Heidi soon, don't make her angry, you hear me? Haley Bloomer, driving her seat skillfully, looked at a larger macaw in the passenger seat with a bit of depression. Got it, got it. The big bird named Peter agreed impatiently, jumping around on the seat, as if it was going to fight a tough battle and was constantly warming up. Rubbing her head with a headache, Haley simply ignored this guy and concentrated on driving. She was also very unladylike, and pressed Peter down on the seat. It hurts, bad guy, let me go. This larger macaw is called Peter, and its scientific name is the colorful macaw. It is a brother and sister with the lost Heidi. I just don't know what kind of conflict these two guys have. Anyway, when I came back, I found out that Heidi hadn't been home for a long time. At this moment, she was a little anxious. These two siblings were her favorites. They had been with her for almost 2 years. It was a birthday gift from her father. Her father was busy with work every day and had no time to accompany her. It was always these two siblings who accompanied her. Now that one of them was suddenly lost, she felt empty in her heart. She drove out to look for them without even eating. Fortunately, in order to prevent them from running around, they were all equipped with locators, so it was not difficult to find them. The only thing that was a little difficult was that this guy actually ran into a ranch, and it looked like it was quite large. Now she didn't dare to barge in. according to the information she had inquired, and called the person in charge of this guy's ranch. This is what happened at the door just now. However, as the car got closer and closer to the villa, Haley's heart became heavier. According to the positioning display, Haley's coordinates were obviously in the villa in front. So, was it caught, or did it fly to the villa accidentally? Especially when she stopped the car and saw the huge wild boar on the ground and the scattered bloodstains, her premonition became more and more bad. Arriving at the door, Haley knocked gently. Soon, Eva came out and opened the door. She looked at Haley with some confusion and asked, "Hello, who are you looking for?" Haley sorted out her mood, forced herself to calm down, forced a smile, and said, "Hello, beautiful lady, I am Haley Bloomer, I am here to visit Mr. Clean, and I have already made an appointment." Eva was stunned for a moment, but still said politely, "Then please wait a moment, I will go and ask." Haley nodded, without any displeasure on her face, but she was already a little irritable in her heart. Coming upstairs, Eva looked at Kinzu with strange eyes. "Boss, someone is looking for you outside." Kinzu was still struggling, without raising his head, and said, "Then let her come up." Eva curled her lips and turned and walked downstairs. "Miss Haley, I'm sorry to have kept you waiting. I'll have someone take you there right away." Eva gave Dale a look, and Dale nodded in understanding, got up and took Haley upstairs. Although she didn't know what this woman wanted to do with Kinzu, the attack a few days ago was still vivid in her mind, so she didn't dare to take it lightly. When Haley followed Dale up to the second floor, she saw Heidi flapping her wings on Kinzu's shoulders, and couldn't help but shouting excitedly, "Heidi, little baby, come here." Looking at the woman in front of her with fair skin, a melon-shaped face without a trace of blemishes, a high-nosed bridge, and a hint of intoxicating temptation in her brown eyes. The woman with thin eyebrows, light lipstick, long golden hair, and pink casual clothes, Kinzu couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Instead of greeting him first, she greeted the little parrot first. Is this a deep love between people and pets? Or does she not take him seriously? If it was the former, it could be forgiven, but if it was the latter, today would be fun. However, Kinzu said nothing, but turned his head to look at Heidi on his shoulder. He also wanted to know how the little girl would react. A scene that was beyond Heidi's expectations, but not beyond Kinzu's expectations, appeared. Chapter 472. Peter is frightened. The little parrot flapped its wings and flew up, landing on the spot prepared for Ha-Ha and Pape. It tilted its head and looked at Haley with its eyes. Although its expression was very lively, it didn't say a word, as if it didn't hear anything. Haley was a little confused. This script was wrong. Every time she called it, it would happily fly over. What was going on now? Ahem, Kinzu coughed twice, breaking the silence at the scene. After everyone's attention was focused on him, he asked knowingly, "Miss, who are you looking for?" Haley blinked her big eyes blankly, and when she saw Kinzu's naked eyes looking directly at her, she came back to her senses. She smiled embarrassedly, and her cherry lips painted with light pink lipstick opened slightly, and her voice was as pleasant as an oriole. "Excuse me, Mr. Clean, I'm here to look for Heidi." As she spoke, Haley stretched out her white fingers and gently pointed at the little parrot on the side. Kinzu nodded gently after hearing this. This attitude is not bad. He has been in the United States for quite some time, or he has been a rich man for some time, and he has also learned about some luxury goods. Therefore, it can be seen that the outfit of this big foreign horse in front of him would cost more than $100,000. Kinzu didn't want to offend such a woman. It can be seen that she still cares about this little parrot. He didn't want to have a conflict with this woman because of a small matter. Just when he was about to say something and send this little guy out, an accident happened again. "Hey, the stinky man on the opposite side, if you know what's good for you, hand over my sister quickly, otherwise," before he finished speaking, Haley, who reacted, covered his mouth with her hand. Now, she really wanted to strangle this prodigal to death. "Why are you butting in?" She could see that Kinzu was not such a difficult person to talk to. She was just about to discuss something with him, but now she was in trouble. Sure enough, Kinzu swallowed back what he was about to say, picked up the strong tea on the coffee table, and took a sip very comfortably. Anyway, it was not him who was begging for help now, he was sitting on the diaotai. Haley smiled awkwardly, with a little blush on her face. After a long pause, she said awkwardly, "Mr. Clean, I'm really sorry. My parrot is not well trained. If there is anything wrong, please forgive me." Kinzu waved his hand indifferently, with an approachable smile on his face, and said, Well, Miss Haley, I picked this guy up too. Since you said it's yours, you can take it away. Haley breathed a sigh of relief when she heard this. Fortunately, this guy is quite sensible. Before she could be happy for long, she heard Kinzu continue with a smile. By the way, Miss Haley, since this is your pet, then there is no need for any coercive means, right? Haley gritted her teeth, looked up again, and looked at Haley, who seemed not to recognize her. She said with some embarrassment, Mr. Clean, I don't know what happened. Haley doesn't seem to recognize me. Kinzu waved his hand to interrupt Haley's words, and also showed an embarrassed expression, saying, Miss Haley, you have to understand me. If this guy is willing to go with you, then I have nothing to say. But if you force it back, what if someone comes to me again in 2 days to ask for a pet, what should I do? Haley was listening to the side and gnashing her teeth. Good Kinzu, you are waiting for her here. But she had to admit that Kinzu's words made some sense, so she was a little embarrassed. Haley. After calling twice tentatively, the little parrot turned its head and looked at her curiously. Haley was delighted, took 2 steps forward carefully, and tentatively reached out to grab him. Seeing this, Haley was like a mouse seeing a cat, flapping her wings quickly and hiding behind Kinzu. It seemed that she was used to being arrogant at home. Seeing Haley dodging all the time, Peter finally couldn't help it, and took advantage of Haley's inattention to break free. Haley, stop right there, you dare to run. As he said that, he flapped his wings and wanted to rush over, obviously because he was used to bullying. However, he obviously forgot that this was someone else's territory, and even ignored the 2 small black dogs hovering in the sky. Just when it was about to pounce on Kinzu, grab its naughty sister, and give her a good beating, it heard a loud eagle cry in its ears. Along with a hurricane from above, it felt its body tighten, and was tightly grasped by something. Ah! Haley was so frightened by the sudden change that she closed her eyes and let out a pleasant scream. After a while, she felt nothing and dared to open her eyes. But the scene she saw almost made her feel distressed to the point of suffocation. She cried with a hint of tears, Let Peter go, Mr. Clean, let Peter go. Kinzu was a little dumbfounded. This seemed to be a bit too much. He quickly took the frightened little parrot Peter from Ha-Ha's claws and handed it over with some embarrassment. Well, Miss Haley, I'm sorry, this guy in my family is not well trained. If there is anything wrong, please forgive me. As soon as the words came out, Kinzu was even more dumbfounded. What a familiar feeling. And Haley almost bit her little silver teeth to pieces. Revenge, this is definitely naked revenge. How could this man be so stingy? Looking at Haley's murderous eyes, Kinzu didn't know what to say. He could only smile awkwardly and pretend that he didn't see it. Fortunately, Ha-Ha was very measured in his attack. Peter didn't have any skin injuries. He was just a little confused by the shock. Not long after returning to Haley's hands, this guy came back to his senses again, but there was always a trace of fear in his eyes when he looked at Kinzu. Especially when Kinzu wanted to comfort it, it was so scared that it flapped its wings and squeezed into Haley's plump chest. Kinzu was envious, but he was even more depressed. You little guy, I didn't do anything to you, shouldn't you be afraid of Ha-Ha? Why are you afraid of me? Mr. Clean, can't you really give Heidi back to me? Haley shook her lips and looked at Heidi with burning eyes. She looked like she was parting with her life and death, which made Kinzu feel a little upset. Although I think this is a bit bad, but, is he a man? Spitting on the ground is like a nail. Since I said that, I can only do this. He shrugged his shoulders and said helplessly, Miss Haley, you can see that I didn't restrict its freedom. It's up to it whether it wants to go or stay. Chapter 473. Take him away so easily. Haley was silent. She didn't know what to say in response. She just stared at Kinzu. Kinzu felt a little uncomfortable being stared at. He turned his head slightly and saw her red eyes. He suddenly felt that he had gone too far. After 2 dry coughs, Kinzu hesitated for a moment and then waved at Heidi. In Haley's surprised eyes, Heidi flew over obediently and landed on Kinzu's shoulder. After organizing his words in his mind, Kinzu said, Well, Miss Haley, it's not that I don't want to give it back to you. Haley wanted to say something as soon as she finished speaking, but was interrupted by Kinzu's wave. Listen to me first. Haley nodded, stared at him, and didn't speak, waiting for his next words. It's like this. Kinzu took Heidi in his hand, looked at her well-behaved appearance in his hand, and smiled helplessly. When I found her, she was in the woods next to me. Kinzu said, pointing to the woods next to her. At the time, her wings were injured, and I picked her up and healed her. Maybe because of this, she has been sticking to me since she recovered. Injured? Haley exclaimed, took Heidi from Kinzu's hand, and looked at her. After observing for a while, Haley looked at Kinzu with suspicion and asked, Mr. Clean, Heidi just got lost last night. Even if she was really injured, it's impossible for her to recover so quickly, right? Kinzu secretly said in his heart, not good. He didn't expect this girl's thinking to be so quick. She could see the flaws. Ms. Haley, don't you know that we Chinese have a very magical medical skill? Haley frowned. Are you talking about Chinese medicine? Seeing Kinzu nod, Haley frowned even tighter, and looked Kinzu up and down with a suspicious look. But doesn't Chinese medicine require decades of experience? You're so young, and you know Chinese medicine. Kinzu was a little stunned by Haley's question, and the corners of his mouth twitched involuntarily. Damn, where did this monster come from? How can he know so much about Chinese affairs? Since the explanation didn't make sense, Kinzu stopped explaining and imitated her, frowning. Miss Haley, now we're talking about Heidi. What do you think we should do with her current situation? Haley raised her eyebrows and curled her lips in disdain. What? Can't pretend anymore? But she didn't say anything. She still looked aggrieved and looked at Kinzu pitifully. Mr. Clean, I believe that as long as it stays with me for a while, it will definitely not stick to you anymore. I'm deeply sorry for the trouble Heidi has caused you. Okay, in that case, then please do as you please. As long as it takes the initiative to follow you, I will never stop it. Kinzu waved his hand indifferently, sat back on the recline, picked up the strong tea, sipped it in small sips, and looked casual. Hearing this, Haley nodded happily, thank you, Mr. Clean. As she said this, she held Heidi and walked towards the garden, obviously not wanting to stay with Kinzu. Boss, just give it back to her like this. Dale raised her eyebrows. From the beginning, this woman gave her a feeling of superiority, which she didn't like very much. Looking at the slender and graceful big foreign horse in the distance, Kinzu nodded indifferently, well, if the little girl voluntarily goes back with her, I can't do anything about it. After all, this girl looks like a rich lady, and it's better not to offend her if you can. Dale nodded disappointedly. She knew that Kinzu was right. It was indeed not worthwhile to offend a rich lady for a parrot. Seeing Dale's somewhat disappointed eyes, Kinzu laughed twice, but didn't say anything. Want the little girl to take the initiative? How is that possible? Just as Kinzu expected, Haley held Heidi and talked for a long time, but it didn't work at all. She was sure that this was Heidi, because she was still as close to her as before. But as soon as she was told to take her home, Heidi immediately refused to do so and flapped her wings to fly away. Kinzu was watching with amusement, his eyes rolling around, which made Dale feel uneasy. Hi, Miss Haley. After thinking for a moment, Kinzu shouted at Heidi, who was still trying hard not far away. Haley turned around, looking at Kinzu with sad eyes and a hint of vigilance. Mr. Clean, we agreed to stay for a while. Kinzu nodded in agreement, and said nothing, just looking at her with a smile. After a long time, until Haley felt a little uncomfortable, Kinzu said, well, Miss Haley, I'm just joking with you. I know the little girl belongs to you. You can take Heidi back. Really? Haley looked up at Kinzu happily, with an expression of disbelief. Kinzu's expression remained the same, with no change. He was still smiling like a modest gentleman. Yes, it's true. We Chinese have a saying that a gentleman does not take away someone else's love. Since Heidi is your sweetheart, how could I possibly compete with you for her? Haley looked at him doubtfully. Why did he change so quickly? He just seemed unwilling to let go, but now he changed his attitude. Is there something wrong here? She has received an elite education since she was a child, and she firmly believes that there is no free lunch in the world. Therefore, after being happy, she frowned slightly and looked at Kinzu with a vigilant look. Mr. Clean, tell me first, what do you need? Kinzu waved his hand, picked up the teacup and blew it gently, and said lightly, Miss Haley, you think too much. I don't need anything. If you don't want it, then stay here. I still like this little guy very much. Haley heard this, and her heart was anxious, and she blurted out, no. After calming down her slightly excited mood, Haley looked at Kinzu deeply, took out a gold-plated business card from her bag and handed it over. Mr. Clean, thank you very much today. If you need anything in the future, you can call me. Kinzu nodded, motioned to Dale next to him to take it, and said with a smile, No need to say polite words, I didn't help much. I just hope that Miss Haley can be better to Heidi in the future. Don't hurt her heart. Haley was a little angry when she heard this. What do you mean by hurting her heart? I don't even know why she came here. However, at this time, she didn't want to say anything more, lest this guy in front of her, who looked sunny but was moody, play any more tricks. Mr. Clean, in that case, I'll take my leave first. Standing up, Haley put the two little guys in a position that Kinzu envied, said hello and went downstairs. Chapter 474 Chain Mew's bad idea. Eva, who was downstairs, looked at Haley carrying two parrots downstairs, and was a little confused. Wasn't that what the boss had just got? However, before she could ask anything, Haley nodded at her, opened the door and walked out. After a while, the roar of a sports car engine sounded at the door, and then gradually became fainter until it faded away. Coming upstairs, looking at Kinzu who was quietly drinking tea on the recline, Eva asked with a hint of curiosity on her face. Clean, who was that just now? Kinzu came back to his senses, looked at Eva, smiled and waved, motioning her to sit next to him. When Eva sat down with a helpless look on her face, Kinzu put his head on her thighs, twisted comfortably, and then said, "A rich lady's parrot accidentally flew to me and was picked up by me." Her. You just gave it back to her so easily? Eva showed a look of disbelief. Such a beautiful woman, didn't Kinzu have any little thoughts? Kinzu rolled his eyes. Was he that kind of person in her heart? But feeling the softness under his head, he decided to forget it and not bother with this little girl. I'm also surprised. The boss was determined not to give it to her at first, but later, for some reason, he returned the parrot to her. Dale, who was next to him, also had an expression of trying to figure out why he was so different before and after. Kinzu smiled proudly, sat up and looked at the two girls. If I say that the parrot will fly back by itself, do you believe it? The two girls looked at each other and shook their heads together. What a joke, it's so far away, it's a miracle that it can fly here once, and it still flies here. They just knew that this woman named Haley worked for a listed company in New York, and this time she came to Revere to vacation at a farm not far away. Maybe she will take the little guy back to New York in a few days, so how can it fly back? Kinzu looked at the two people's disbelief, smiled mysteriously, and said nothing more. When Eva was about to ask more questions, Chenmu came up from downstairs. Seeing the two women, he smiled and nodded, then looked at Kinzu and said, "Boss, I have loaded the bluefin tuna and will take it back soon." Kinzu smiled and motioned him to sit down, then asked, "Have you contacted the media?" Seeing this, Eva pulled Dale downstairs, leaving the space upstairs for the two of them. The smile on Chenmu's face never faded. He watched the two women disappear from his sight, then nodded and said, "We have contacted several major American media, all of them have been informed, and the money that should be spent has been spent. I believe that by tomorrow, the whole of Boston will be lively because of this big guy." Kinzu smiled with satisfaction. He was still very relieved to let Chenmu do things. This guy can go from being a black worker to his current position. In addition to Joseph's support, it is also inseparable from his own ability. Well, have you thought about how to deal with this guy? Kinzu pointed to the refrigerated truck parked downstairs. Chenmu nodded slightly, as if he had thought of something, and smiled particularly sinisterly. Originally, I was going to keep it for our own restaurant to digest. Although bluefin tuna is the most popular in the island country, it is not much worse in the United States. It is not difficult for our restaurant to digest it. And it can also increase the popularity of our restaurant. Kinzu knew that since he said that, it meant that there must be a backup plan, so he asked in cooperation. Then what happened later? What do you think now? Later, I sent invitations to those well-known sushi restaurants in the island country. Such a big bluefin tuna is also the world record holder. They should be very interested. As he said this, Chenmu's mouth corners were slightly raised, revealing an evil arc, and there was a strong taste of gloating in his words. After hearing this, Kinzu frowned slightly. In this way, wouldn't it be equivalent to giving those guys free publicity? Chenmu looked at Kinzu's slightly frowned brows and explained with a smile. "Boss, the Japanese are very interested in the world's #1. If nothing goes wrong, this bluefin tuna will definitely be bought by them. But if the Japanese here just bought back a bluefin tuna that is said to be the world's #1, and there is another bigger bluefin tuna on the other side, what will be the consequences?" Kinzu looked at Chenmu thoughtfully, as if he understood something. Chenmu did not keep him in suspense, but continued to explain. In that case, the one they bought back would not have the title of the world's #1. In other words, they spent a lot of money, fought their way out of the encirclement, and only bought back an ordinary bluefin tuna. After hearing this, Kinzu couldn't help but smile and applaud, looking at Chen Mu with a sigh. Not bad, not bad. Not only let those guys suffer a loss, but also can be sold at a high price. You did a perfect job. Chen Mu smiled modestly and said nothing more. Kinzu raised his eyebrows upon seeing this. In that case, I'll tell you a good news. Chen Mu raised his head and looked at Kinzu curiously. Boss, what good news? Could this be better? I think so. Kinzu touched his chin, looking thoughtful. Oh? Boss, tell me quickly. Chen Mu immediately became interested and became anxious. Kinzu didn't try to whet his appetite. He took a sip of tea and said with a smile, nothing much, it's just that truffles probably won't be in short supply in the future. What? Chen Mu stood up in an instant, and his voice couldn't help but get louder. Before Kinzu could react, Dale rushed in. Boss, are you okay? Kinzu was awakened by Dale's voice, smiled and waved his hand, indicating that he was fine, and then said with some dissatisfaction. Brother Chen, don't be so excited, right? Chen Mu shook his head and muttered to himself, you don't understand, you don't understand. After a moment, Chen Mu regained his composure, sat back in the chair, and asked in a trance. Boss, do you mean that you have found a way to cultivate truffles, or have you discovered a truffle production area of a large area? Kinzu frowned and thought for a while, then hesitantly said, it should be considered that you have found a production area. The quantity is not bad. Chen Mu nodded with a little disappointment. It would be great if he could have a method to grow truffles. But thinking about it, he smiled bitterly again. How could this be possible? So many countries in the world are studying this. If they really come up with artificial breeding, how can they get their turn? This is really good news, more exciting than my selling bluefin tuna. Chapter 475 Dealing with the Wild Boar. Chen Mu left with good news. He was going back to start his plan. When Chen Mu left, Kinzu was still thinking about his idea. It must be said that this was a good idea. However, it would also cheat the owners of those island sushi restaurants. However, even if it really cheated, so what? Although Kinzu is not an angry young man, it is okay to do such things that harm others and benefit oneself occasionally. After solving everything, Kinzu remembered that there was still a big wild boar downstairs that had not been dealt with. Frowning, thinking that old John must be busy patrolling the ranch and had no time to deal with him, he called Will. After a while, Will and Simon came over with knives, talking and laughing at each other. Kinzu smiled and nodded to the two of them. Thank you for your hard work. Will looked at the big guy on the ground and couldn't help but exclaimed, this guy is really strong. After turning around and hearing what Kinzu said, he smiled and said, Boss, don't be so polite. This is what we should do. After that, he called Simon next to him, let's go and deal with this guy first. When the two of them were carrying the big wild boar with some difficulty and went to the back to deal with it, Kinzu picked up his phone and called Lin Yu. What's wrong? Boss Kin remembered to call me. Lin Yu stood a little far away from the villa and looked over, with a hint of ridicule in her tone. Kinzu looked at the workers who were sweating profusely at the back of the villa and said, nothing, we killed a big wild boar this morning, and I asked someone to deal with it. Let's call everyone to eat together at noon. Lin Yu was stunned for a moment. She thought Kinzu was urging the progress of the project again, but she didn't expect this guy to be able to connect with people. Lin Yu responded. Her tone became a little gentle, and she said, then I'll ask the chef to do it. We can't trouble that big boss to cook in person. Kinzu nodded, and didn't refuse. He really didn't want to cook. After all, it wasn't just one or two people. After a while, a van drove into the ranch and stopped at the door of the villa. Several young Chinese guys jumped down and looked at the luxurious villa in front of them with some surprise. The envy in their eyes could be seen by everyone. Fortunately, the quality of several people was good. Perhaps it was because they were in a foreign country, they were a little restrained. Seeing Eva coming forward to ask, Kinzu walked down from upstairs and came to the door of the villa. He just ran into Kinzu head on. Clean, what is this? Eva pointed to the truck not far away and looked at him curiously. Nothing, didn't I kill a wild boar? I asked the workers to come and eat together. As soon as he finished speaking, Kinzu saw Lin Yu walking from a distance with graceful steps. Today she was not wearing the uniform. Perhaps because she needed to work, she changed into a sky blue work jacket. Even so, The loose work clothes could not hide her hot body. Her plump chest was high, her long legs were straight and slender, her long black hair was casually scattered behind her head, and even a pair of rustic black framed glasses could not hide her delicate face. Hey, where did this country girl come from? She is so pretty. Qin Zhu pretended to be surprised, staring at Lin Yu's tower in bulge and taking advantage of her. You are the country girl, you are just an old-fashioned man. Lin Yu gave Qin Zhu a charming look, but ignored him and turned around to give orders. Several young guys and two middle-aged men who got off the car asked them to start moving things down. Qin Zhu laughed twice, not caring about it, and followed behind with his hands folded, watching Lin Yu commanding her. Soon, tables, chairs, pots and pans, stoves and other messy things were all taken out of the car one by one. Just like the chefs who hosted banquets on farms in China, they all brought their own tableware and chairs, but the ones here looked more advanced and cleaner. According to Lin Yu, these people all came from China and had been following the engineering team, specifically responsible for cooking. After all, this project is for Chinese people. If you hire a foreign chef or always let these guys eat Western food, they will not be used to it. For example, foreigners usually have a hamburger and a bottle of Coke at noon. Don't talk about these manual laborers. If you let Qin Zhu eat a hamburger at noon, he will feel like he hasn't eaten and will be hungry before the afternoon. Looking at the busy people, Qin Zhu didn't say anything, just smiled and watched from the side. Now he is qualified to do so. However, this made Lin Yu a little uncomfortable. She couldn't stand the naked gaze of Qin Zhu from behind and the hot eyes of the young men in front. Especially the way those young men looked at her, although more subtle than Qin Zhu's, the kind of veiled peeping made Lin Yu feel uncomfortable. Come to think of it, she was at the age of youth, and unlike those old guys, she couldn't control her emotions and heart. In addition, Lin Yu was a hot beauty with a hot body, and she was of the same race as herself, which made them feel excited. It was a pity that the difference in status was a big bit, but this couldn't resist their curious eyes. They kept moving their hands and feet, but their eyes glanced over from time to time. Before long, Lin Yu had to give up and hid behind Qin Zhu helplessly, saying, "You go and arrange it." These are the chefs who are usually responsible for the workers' meals. Although their skills are average, they make authentic Chinese dishes. Qin Zhu nodded to indicate that it was no problem. He didn't care about the peeping of these guys. Everyone was young and ignorant. Besides, the goddess that others can only admire from afar can be bullied at will. Isn't this what most men expect? While thinking about it, Will came over with his hands wiped, looked at the chairs and benches here curiously, and asked, "Boss, it's done. What should I do?" Qin Zhu nodded slightly, indicating that he knew. "It's okay, just leave it there. If you want to eat it, just get 2 pieces for yourself." Will waved his hands repeatedly after hearing this. "Boss, we don't need it. This thing is not very delicious." After saying this, he realized that the boss in front of him seemed to like this thing very much. He smiled awkwardly. "Boss, I'll go get the big guy." After saying this, he turned around and ran away quickly. Qin Zhu looked at this guy with a wry smile. "He hasn't prepared it yet, where are you going to put it?" Helplessly, Qin Zhu walked forward and waved at that side. Soon, a middle-aged Chinese man walked over and stretched out his hand with a smile on his face. "Mr. Clean, hello, my name is Wang Yanggen." Unknowingly, the 10-year-old old bug has also been promoted to the helmsman. I owe it first and will make up for it later. Fin DS capture much as great as Pelaga has to L final. No SE over indeed I'll like bus gasms contendo exclusive YXO in medito. Siascrabata news to Patreon. Recuerda, card alike, Siascripsino Donaking nos anima continued. Great as a todas nos vemos on Alpsmovdo.